This is the story of Kim Dokja, who is the only reader of a novel called 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World. The novel has been written and published over 10 years, and Kim Dokja has read it all the way to the end. The novel suddenly turns into reality, and Dokja's life transforms completely. He goes from being a pathetic loser to an MC in no time, as uses his special knowledge of the story. The story begins with a young man reading the final chapter of a web novel called 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, also known as Tusa. His name is Kim Dokja. Dokja's name often confuses people because it sounds like it means only child, reader, or individualist in Korean. His father chose the name to make him strong and independent, but Dokja has been lonely and single his whole life. This defines who he is. Dokja is 28 years old and has attended a third-rate college. He now works as a contractor at a branch of a large company. That day, while riding the subway, Dokja reads a novel on his phone. Suddenly, a woman approaches him and makes a strange comment about him getting pulled into his phone. When Dokja looks up, he recognizes her. She is Sangha Yoo, a woman from the HR department at his company. Dokja greets Sangha and notices she sits beside him. She explains she is heading home and mentions she got lucky because her team manager is away on a business trip. Dokja feels uneasy when she sits next to him. He finds it hard to believe he has run into Sangha, who is the most admired woman at work. Many men in the company seem to want her attention, and Dokja thinks she is far out of his league. Sangha explains that she usually rides her bike to work, but her bike was stolen, so she has to take the train instead. Dokja observes her more closely and understands why so many admire her, but he feels no connection between their lives. He believes his world is too different from hers. During the train ride, Dokja focuses on reading his novel, while Sangha practices learning Spanish. She notices his concentration and asks him about what he is reading. Her question surprises him, and he quickly puts his phone away. However, she catches a glimpse of the screen and seems excited. She mentions her interest in authors like Murakami Haruki and Raymond Carver. Dokja thinks that even if he explains, she would not understand. He cannot bring himself to tell her what he is reading. Dokja enjoys reading web novels, but he feels embarrassed about his hobby. However, the story he is reading, Tusa, holds a special place in his life. It is a long, epic tale that has been serialized for 10 years. Dokja started reading it as a teenager, and now, as an adult, he is about to finish it. Tusa has been with Dokja during the most difficult times in his life. He read it when he was bullied, when he failed his exams, and when he ended up at a third-rate college. He also read it during his military service, where he was assigned to dangerous tasks, and even now, when his job feels meaningless as he keeps getting transferred. The novel has a total of 3,149 episodes. In the beginning, it gained some popularity, but by chapter 50, Dokja was the only reader left. He feels like the story was written just for him. Since he could not afford to donate to the author, he once left a comment to thank them for the story. Realizing that Sangha is still waiting for his response, Dokja quickly changes the subject. He brings up the topic of their company contract, which is about to end soon. But then Dokja remembers that Sangha was promoted to a full-time position last month because of her hard work. Unlike her, he did not receive a promotion. He thinks that if life were a novel, Sangha would be the heroine. He wonders if he could ever be the main character in a story, but in a completely different genre. He imagines his life as something other than non-fiction, perhaps as a fantasy. However, Dokja knows the truth. The genre of his life is non-fiction, and he is not the protagonist in this story. He is just a reader who needs to live his own life. This realization also makes him think that Samba should pursue her own happiness too. He feels a little relieved after successfully steering the conversation away. Suddenly, Dokja receives a message from someone named TLS 123. The sender thanks him for reading their novel. Dokja wonders if this person could be author of Tusa. The sender appreciates Dokja's dedication to the story and asks for his email address to send a gift as a token of gratitude. After a few moments, Dokja receives the promised gift. The sender informs him that Tusa will start charging for its content at 7 p.m. When Dokja checks the time, it is 6:55 p.m., leaving him only 5 minutes. He looks at his phone to check if the novel's content is still there, but he finds nothing. This confuses him. He wonders if the content has been removed without warning. Suddenly, the subway lights go out and the train breaks down with a loud crash. A strange hissing noise fills the air as the train comes to a slow stop. The passengers immediately fear it might be a terrorist attack. Dokja checks on Sangha to ensure she is safe, and fortunately, she is unharmed. She grips his arm tightly, clearly frightened. Dokja tries to comfort her, suggesting that it is probably nothing serious. At that moment, he glances at his phone and sees the time. It is exactly 7 p.m. Dokja is lost in thought when the conductor suddenly announces that everyone must leave the train immediately. Both Dokja and Sangha feel uneasy, unsure of what is happening. Suddenly, a bright flash lights up the cabin, and a system message appears out of nowhere. The message states that the free service of the 8612 planetary system has ended and that the main scenario is now beginning. It was from that moment the genre of his life completely changed. Dokja observes the strange events unfolding and the opening lines of that novel echo in his mind. He struggles to believe it could be real, but the similarities are undeniable. Suddenly, a bizarre creature appears in midair. The creature, called a Dokkaebi, is dressed in straw and covered in hair. It does not resemble a fairy, angel, or devil, but seems like something entirely different. Dokja stares at the Dokkaebi in shock, while the other passengers whisper and speculate. Some people wonder what the creature is saying because they cannot understand its language. Others dismiss it as a trick, and a few even comment on its odd appearance. In that moment, Dokja realizes he is the only one who knows what is happening. He recognizes the Dokkaebi from the first chapter of Tusa. This creature is responsible for the tragedy described across thousands of episodes in the novel. Dokja's hand shakes as he grips his phone tightly, trying to process what is happening. The voice of Dokkaebi echoes through the cabin, asking if the passengers can hear it. The Dokkaebi casually explains that there is a minor glitch with the language patch, as if this is a perfectly normal situation. The passengers, however, are far from calm. One man steps forward, asking the Dokkaebi what it is trying to pull, and jokingly wonders if it's part of some movie production. Another impatient passenger complains that he has an interview to attend and can't afford to waste time. 3 others march up to the Dokkaebi, demanding it restart the train immediately. The cabin fills with noise as more passengers begin shouting, their frustration and confusion taking over. The Dokkaebi, clearly annoyed, tries to get everyone to calm down and listen, but the commotion only grows louder. Meanwhile, Dokja observes the scene unfolding before him. The events are painfully familiar, matching the storyline of Tusa almost word for word. He feels a sense of urgency, knowing exactly how this situation will end if it continues. Dokja wants to intervene and stop the passengers from making things worse, but he hesitates, unsure of how to handle the chaos. He quietly tells Sangha to stay put, knowing she will be safer that way. As more passengers continue complaining, the Dokkaebi finally loses its patience. With a terrifying outburst, it unleashes its power, instantly causing the heads of several people to burst. The sudden violence leaves the remaining passengers frozen in fear. Blood spreads rapidly across the floor, and the once noisy cabin falls into an eerie silence. The Dokkaebi coldly informs them that this is not a movie, a dream, a book, or even the real world. Its tone is so matter-of-fact that it only deepens the horror for those who survive. Dokja feels his disbelief slowly fade as the gruesome reality sinks in. He doesn't want to accept it, but the scene in front of him leaves no room for doubt. This isn't a joke or an illusion. Everything is real, and it is just the beginning of the nightmare. Dokja feels like Neo from The Matrix, slowly piecing together the cracks in his understanding of reality. He observes the events, questions them, and eventually has no choice but to accept the truth. As much as he doesn't want to believe it, he realizes there's no escaping the conclusion. Tusa has somehow become reality. The Dokkaebi's menacing expression becomes sharper as it speaks, pointing out that the passengers have been living comfortably until now. They have enjoyed basic things like breathing, eating, and reproducing, all without paying a price. Its tone grows colder as it declares that the free ride is over and nothing in life comes without a cost. Fear spreads across the passengers' faces as they realize they have no idea how to handle the situation. Suddenly, one man steps forward with an unusual amount of bravery, or perhaps sheer stubbornness, despite the bloody scene they just witnessed. Dokja and Sangha recognize him as Myongo Han, a familiar face. Myongo, in a confident and almost absurd display of courage, asks the Dokkaebi if money will solve the problem. He starts offering amounts going up to millions, claiming he can pay whatever it takes if the Dokkaebi will let him go. The Dokkaebi doesn't seem amused. It explains that money is nothing more than a piece of plant fiber, a symbol humans use to agree on value within their own small boundaries of space and time. With a flick of its fingers, the Dokkaebi sets the check Myongo offers ablaze, the flames consuming it in seconds. The Dokkaebi warns him not to try something so foolish again unless he wants his head to explode like the others. Turning back to the rest of the passengers, the Dokkaebi declares there is no time for meaningless chatter. It points out that their debt is piling up as they waste precious moments. Instead of explaining further, the Dokkaebi dismissively says it will be faster for them to learn the truth themselves. As the Dokkaebi speaks, its horns grow longer, adding to its menacing appearance. In that instant, a glowing status window appears out of thin air. It states that channel by 7623 is opened and announces that Constellations are now logging in. The passengers stare in confusion as the system message pops up in front of everyone, including Dokja. He focuses on the screen, his heart pounding as it declares that the main scenario has officially begun. The main scenario is called Prove Your Value. The objective is simple but horrifying: to kill at least one living thing. Before disappearing in a burst of blinding light, the Dokkaebi leaves the passengers with a sarcastic wish for good luck, its sinister grin making the moment even more chilling. It adds that it expects an amazing story from them, clearly enjoying their fear and confusion. The passengers react in all sorts of ways. Some rush to the train doors, desperately trying to escape, while others frantically call the police. Sangha tries calling as well, but no one answers. Frustrated and scared, she turns to Dokja, asking him what they should do. Dokja remains surprisingly calm, though it's clear he's thinking hard. He tells Sangha to stay composed and reminds her of a game she once played, one where only a few people survive the end of the world. Sangha stares at him, completely confused, and asks what that has to do with their current situation. Dokja explains that they should think of themselves as players in a game. To survive, they must learn and follow the rules. Even after hearing this, Sangha doesn't fully understand what Dokja is trying to say, but she can tell he is taking this seriously. The scene inside the train is grim and surreal. The floor is littered with bodies as if they were discarded trash. Office workers sit trembling in blood-stained clothes, their eyes wide with terror. An old woman sits in a corner, clutching her hands together as she prays desperately. The boundaries between reality and fantasy seem to blur completely in this moment. Dokja closes his eyes and tries to focus. He needs a plan, something that will help them survive. As he thinks, another man steps forward, trying to take control of the chaotic scene. The man speaks loudly and confidently, urging everyone to stop panicking. He warns that even small disturbances could lead to more casualties in a national emergency like this one. The passengers are not pleased with the man taking charge. Many demand to know who he is. The man calmly shows his identity card and introduces himself as Hyunsung Lee, an army lieutenant from Unit 6502. Dokja expected the situation to escalate into a national emergency, so this revelation doesn't surprise him. What shocks him, though, is something else entirely. Dokja realizes he knows this man, even though they have never met in real life. He recognizes the name from Tuza. Hyunsung is one of the novel's supporting characters. Seeing someone from the story come to life leaves Dokja in disbelief. Hyunsung is supposed to appear after the first scenario in the novel, not during it. Dokja begins to feel uneasy, wondering why events are happening out of order. He thinks that if he could reread the novel, he might understand what is going on. Before he can make sense of it, someone in the cabin shouts that the Prime Minister is speaking live on television. Everyone falls silent as the broadcast begins. The Prime Minister declares a high-level emergency, but before he can say more, his head suddenly explodes. The horrifying sight leaves the passengers frozen in shock. Moments later, the Dokkaebi reappears, casually reminding everyone that this isn't a prank or a terrorist attack. It announces that the difficulty of the scenario will now increase. It shortens the time limit to 10 minutes and warns that if no one dies within 5 minutes, it will kill everyone in the cabin. Dokja watches the chaos unfold, feeling a strange mix of familiarity and unease. The sequence of events matches the beginning of Tusa perfectly, yet something feels off. He can't shake the feeling that something crucial is missing. He begins to wonder why the novel's main character has not appeared yet. If Hyunsung Lee, a major supporting character, is already here, then the protagonist should also be present. Dokja thinks carefully, trying to remember the sequence of events. If he is right, the main character should appear soon. Before he can dwell on it further, the cabin behind them suddenly explodes. The sound of the blast is deafening and the passengers scream in terror. Someone yells that people are being killed. A young man rushes to block the door, hoping to stop the chaos from spilling into their cabin. However, he collides with an invisible barrier. A system message appears, informing everyone that no one can leave or enter the cabin until the scenario is completed. Meanwhile, on the live broadcast, the Dokkaebi appears again, clearly amused. It comments on how some cabins are far more lively than others, enjoying the unfolding panic. To make its point, it decides to show the passengers what will happen if they fail to act within the next 5 minutes. The screen switches to a live stream of students in their classroom. Just as their time limit runs out, a horrifying scene plays. One by one, the students at Taepong Girls' High School are brutally murdered. Dokja cannot bear to watch and closes his eyes, overwhelmed by anger and disgust. However, the feed lingers on one girl, Jai Lee, a sophomore in Class B. In a shocking act of desperation, she strangles her friend, becoming the only survivor of Channel Bay 23,515. The Dokkaebi laughs wickedly, thoroughly entertained by the gruesome turn of events. The passengers inside the train are paralyzed with fear. Even Sangha is visibly shaking, unable to comprehend what is happening. Despite the horrifying situation, Dokja remains calm. His mind races with questions, particularly about why the main character still hasn't appeared. Some events match Tusa perfectly, while others are entirely unfamiliar to him. Dokja instinctively checks his phone, hoping to find Tusa there. To his dismay, the novel is no longer available. Then a sudden thought strikes him, and he quickly opens the email sent to him earlier. To his surprise, he finds an attachment. When Dokja opens the file, he is stunned to see that it is the novel he has been searching for. The author has sent it to him as a gift. He briefly wonders if it is illegal, but the weight of the situation keeps him from lingering on the thought. A new system window appears, explaining that every character in Tusa is given a unique attribute and a skill tied to it. Dokja tries multiple times to open his own attribute window, but nothing happens. Dokja begins to worry as he tries to understand what is happening. If he cannot access his attributes window, he won't be able to learn what his attribute or skill is. Determined to find a solution, he decides to read the attached file from the email. As soon as he opens it, a system message appears, informing him that his attribute has been activated. It states that his reading speed has been enhanced. At first, Dokja is surprised by this discovery. His attribute, accelerated reading, feels underwhelming compared to what he had expected. However, he quickly realizes how useful it is. In less than a minute, he finishes reading the opening chapter of Tusa. Grateful for the ability, he starts to connect the dots. When Dokja notices he is in cabin 3807, an unsettling realization hits him. The events happening around him differ from what he remembers in the novel. He recalls that the protagonist of Tusa is supposed to be in cabin 3707, which is located right behind his current cabin. Dokja starts thinking about what the story says about cabin 3807. A specific line from the novel flashes in his mind. The protagonist looks into the chaos of cabin 3807 and only 2 people survive. His thoughts are interrupted when Namwoon Kim, a teenager, violently lashes out at someone he had been arguing with. The sudden aggression draws everyone's attention. Sanga, visibly shaking, turns to Dokja, asking if they should intervene. Dokja feels a growing sense of dread. He knows the tragic outcome of cabin 3807 all too well. In the novel, the only survivors are Hyunsung Lee and Namwoon Kim, the same teenager now causing chaos. Dokja glances at Sanga and realizes the horrifying truth. If a story unfolds as written, everyone else in the cabin, including himself and Sanga, is doomed. Han steps forward, trying to stop Namwoon from continuing his attack on the elderly woman. He pleads with Namwoon to show some respect for the elderly, but Namwoon's response is cold and unapologetic. He points to the screen displaying scenes of people killing each other and declares that the army will not save them. Someone must die, he says, and they need to decide who it will be. Namwoon goes further, accusing the group of pretending to be morally superior. He says that they believe killing others to survive is wrong and inhuman. Normally, he admits he might agree with that, but this situation is different. He insists they now live in a world where survival depends on killing or being killed. In his mind, no one can be blamed for choosing to protect their own life. Namwoon tells the passengers to face reality. The world they once knew is gone, and they must adapt to the harsh new rules of survival. With his words, he breaks the fragile moral code that has held the group together, pushing them into a darker mindset. Hyunsung watches the events unfold but cannot bring himself to intervene. He cringes as the passengers, one by one, begin to turn on the older woman. They attack her, their fear and desperation overpowering their humanity. Hyunsung looks away, unable to face the horrifying scene. The countdown continues, and the passengers are fully aware of the grim reality. If no one dies within the next 5 minutes, every single one of them will be killed. In that moment, their most basic survival instincts take over, erasing any semblance of rational thought or compassion. Dokja stands apart from the chaos, observing everything as though it were happening in another world. He notices that the elderly woman, whose name he does not know, was not meant to survive in the original scenario. Dokja hesitates, knowing that if he interferes, it could disrupt the course of the story. Any significant changes might leave him with less of the original plot to rely on. Dokja questions his own decision to stay silent. He wonders if it is fair to let the woman die just so he can survive. As he hesitates, Sanga suddenly rushes toward the chaos, but Dokja quickly stops her. He warns her not to act recklessly because it is far too dangerous. Sanga knows this, yet her sense of justice pushes her forward. Dokja thinks to himself that some people are meant to stand out, no matter the situation or genre. However, he also knows that Saima cannot change the outcome of the scenario. She is not the heroine in this world, and her actions won't alter the story's course. Desperate to keep her safe, Dokja pleads with Sanga to stay where she is. He promises her that if she listens to him just this once, he will never bother her again. Dokja takes a deep breath, knowing that it is not the right time for him to step in. His hesitation is not because he fears Namwoon or the others, more because he agrees with their savage actions. Dokja is waiting for something specific to happen. The scenario timer ticks down to 7 minutes and 32 seconds, and at that exact moment, a loud bang echoes from the back cabin. Smoke begins to fill the air, and Dokja knows the time to act has arrived. Without hesitation, Dokja dashes toward the commotion, his mind focused on one thing. Reaching Namwoon, he tackles him with enough force to send him flying across the cabin. Namwoon, now furious, shouts at Dokja, demanding to know why he interfered. Dokja doesn't answer. Instead, his attention is fixed on something else. He quickly finds a young boy holding an insect box. Without hesitation, Dokja grabs the box, gives the boy one of the bugs inside, and takes the rest for himself. Turning to the rest of the cabin, Dokja raises his voice, commanding everyone to stop. He points out that killing the elderly woman will not guarantee their survival. His words catch everyone's attention, and they all turn toward him. Dokja calmly reminds them of the Dokkaebi's instruction to kill one each. Then he asks them who they plan to murder next. Namwoon, unfazed, smirks and responds mockingly. He declares that losers like Dokja will be the next to die. Dokja confronts Namwoon, questioning the need to risk their lives when there is a way to survive without becoming murderers. He reminds everyone that the scenario does not require killing a human being. Instead, it says they need to kill one or more living organisms. To prove his point, he holds a bug in his hand and shows it to the others. At that moment, Dokja stands against the chaos spreading around him. A madness so intense had almost led someone to try killing an elderly woman. Despite this tension, a smile appears on his face. Dokja wonders about himself and whether he has always been the kind of person who acts this way. He crushes the bug in his hand and completes the first kill mission. The system rewards him with 100 coins. After receiving the reward, he throws the remaining insects from the box onto the ground. This action shocks the other passengers, causing many of them to panic. Namwoon asks why Dokja would throw the bugs away instead of letting others use them. Dokja answers calmly, saying there are only 3 bugs left in the box. Namwoon reacts with loud laughter, mocking Dokja. He accuses him of throwing the bugs away because not everyone on the train could survive. Dokja confirms this is true, which angers Namwoon further. Namwoon calls Dokja's actions ridiculous and says no one in their right mind would act like this. His expression becomes wild and sinister. He claims Dokja must be lying and insists that Dokja only wants to watch the others fight for survival. Dokja observes Namwoon closely and realizes that he enjoys seeing people suffer. Namwoon thrives in situations like this, full of cruelty and chaos. Suddenly, a character profile window appears in front of Dokja. It shows detailed information about Namwoon, including his attribute. Dokja learns that Namwoon's attribute is edgelord. Most edgelords in Tusa could not cope with the nightmare that had turned into reality. Many of them ended their own lives. Namwoon, however, was different. He earned the nickname Delusion Demon Kim Namwoon for a reason. Unlike others, he had been preparing for the end of the world for a long time. When it finally happened, he adapted to the chaos very quickly. Time for the main scenario is running out. Only 2 minutes and 59 seconds remain. Cabin 3707 is completely engulfed in flames. Inside the fire, a mysterious man dressed in black survives. His dark silhouette moves as he tries to enter cabin 3807. Meanwhile, Dokja and Namwoon exchange awkward looks. Namwoon, intrigued by his earlier response, suggests they work together. A system message appears, stating that Dokja now understands Namwoon's character better. Dokja immediately rejects the offer. He tells Namwoon that he prefers to work alone. Dokja knows that if he had raided Tusa, he might have made a different decision. However, as someone familiar with the story, he already knows Namwoon's true nature and what he will become in the future. Namwoon is disappointed by his refusal. Frustrated, he approaches the elderly woman who is barely breathing. Before Namwoon can act, Dokja grabs his hand to stop him. Namwoon turns to Dokja, angry and disgusted. He accuses Dokja of pretending to be a hero and declares his hatred for him. Namwoon's anger grows stronger. When he can no longer hold back, he strikes at Dokja. However, Dokja reacts instinctively, using his power. Namwoon's attack misses Dokja's head by a narrow margin. Dokja feels anger building up inside him, but before he can react, another attack comes from Namwoon. This time, Dokja blocks it with his hand. He notices that Namwoon's attribute, the edgelord skill called Grimdark Awakening Level 1, is now activated. Namwoon launches another attack, but it misses again and strikes the ground instead. Namwoon realizes the strength of his newly awakened power and begins laughing hysterically. Dokja observes him and thinks about why the protagonist of Tusa must have recruited someone like Namwoon, even though he's a psychopath. A system message appears, informing Dokja that his understanding of Namwoon Kim has increased again. Another system message follows shortly after. It tells Dokja that he has unlocked a skill called Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint at level 1. Dokja feels confused because he doesn't know what kind of skill this is or how to use it. The loud sounds of the fight between Dokja and Namwoon start to draw the attention of the passengers. Despite Namwoon's repeated attacks, he still cannot land a single hit on Dokja. Dokja notices a message appear, warning him that Namwoon is about to aim for his right shoulder. Dokja quickly dodges this attack. Another message follows, warning him of an incoming punch aimed at his face. The gap between Namwoon's fist and Dokja's face narrows to just inches, but Dokja manages to evade it again. Dokja falls to the floor, feeling the weight of the battle. Namwoon's anger reaches its peak. Dokja realizes that he cannot fight back against Namwoon. His only option is to dodge and survive. He knows that if he can endure just a little longer, the scenario will end. Dokja looks at Namwoon and informs him that only 2 minutes remain before the main scenario concludes. Dokja notices that the old woman is still lying on the ground. He realizes that if she dies, Namwoon will clear the scenario. Acting quickly, Dokja grabs her and tries to roll away to stop Namwoon from succeeding. However, Dokja does not realize that Namwoon is waiting for this exact moment to catch him off guard. Thanks to his skill, Dokja senses that Namwoon is planning to aim for his heart. He manages to avoid serious harm, and the only injury he gets is a scrape on his shoulder. Namwoon's attack misses and hits the floor instead. Dokja then carries the grandmother away, leaving Namwoon frustrated as he watches them. Dokja thinks about survival. He believes that if he loses to Namwoon, he will die because only the strongest survive. He sees this as the unchanging rule, both before and after the world changed. He decides he must follow that same rule. Namwoon urges Dokja to act quickly since time is running out. Dokja responds by asking if an insect egg counts as a living organism. Namwoon, confused, questions him. Dokja calmly confirms his point and takes out the grasshopper's body from his pocket, the one he killed earlier. A popping sound is heard and a fluid spills out from the grasshopper's body. The disgusting liquid spreads over Dokja's hand as a message appears. The message informs him that he has killed a living organism and earned 100 bonus coins as additional compensation. Namwoon, enraged, lunges at Dokja in anger, demanding to know how he was supposed to know the answer. The attack comes fast and is difficult to avoid. A system message appears asking Dokja if he wants a tutorial on using coins. Dokja skips the tutorial because he already knows how coins work. Instead, he invests 2,700 coins to boost his stamina. His stamina level rises from 1 to 10, and his strength and endurance improves significantly. Namwoon tries again to stab Dokja in the heart, but his attack fails. Namwoon steps back immediately, confused about what just happened. Dokja stares directly at Namwoon and declares that he is not the one who will die. Namwoon is. With less than 1 minute left in the scenario, Namwoon launches a relentless series of attacks. Dokja remains steady and unshaken, showing no fear. The time runs out, marking the end of the scenario. Shortly after, the Dokkaebi appears, looking fascinated by the mess they are in. The Dokkaebi wonders what in the world has happened here. At the end of the first main scenario, only 5 survivors remain. They are Hyunsung Lee, Sanbae-yu, Jiliong Lee, Myeongo Han, and Dokja Kim. Dokja looks down at Namwoon's lifeless body and recalls the moment when Namwoon begged him for help. Dokja had refused to help him. And as the time ended, Namwoon's head exploded, just like the heads of the others who failed the scenario. Dokja realizes that he could have saved more people. He knows it would be dishonest to say he feels no guilt. However, he is surprised by how calm he feels. It almost seems as if he is reading a story, not living through these events. He notices his reflection in the darkened window of the train. At first, he thinks the blood is on his face, but then he understands it is actually smeared on the glass. Dokja learns that killing non-resistant organisms cuts his coin rewards in half. Even so, he gains 6,200 coins in total, though 2,700 were already spent to improve his stats. He finally accepts the truth. The world he once knew is gone. A new world has been born, and he is the only one who knows how this story will end. The subway train comes to a stop near Dongo Bridge. Some of the survivors stand and look outside. The view reveals a ruined Seoul with collapsed buildings. In the Han River, giant snake-like monsters are devouring the remains of a crashed fighter jet. Dokja immediately recognizes these creatures. They are ichthyosaurs, monsters often called sea serpents in the world of Tusa. One of the ichthyosaurs turns its gaze toward the train. Some of the survivors react with fear. Dokja, however, remains indifferent as the creature approaches. He understands these monsters are not a threat to them. In the world of Tusa, scenarios are the highest priority. Creatures like the ichthyosaurs do not attack unless they are directly part of a scenario. The Dokkaebi feels immense joy as he counts the stars that appear around him. These stars represent how many constellations have subscribed to his channel. Dokja notices this and thinks the Dokkaebi is overwhelmed with happiness. For a new Dokkaebi, having 21 viewers is a significant achievement. In the world of Tusa, constellations are mysterious and powerful beings. They observe events from distant nebulas and are the masterminds behind the chaos. They are the ones watching the scenarios broadcasted on the Dokkaebi's channel. Dokja remembers that in the original story, Namwoon had killed almost everyone in the cabin. This time, Dokja's actions have changed that outcome. However, he knows that some constellations are angry because of his interference. He picks up Namwoon's knife and reflects on how things have changed. Just one day ago, their roles were reversed, and now the constellations are watching him instead. A system message appears, stating that several constellations admire the way Dokja handled the scenario. They reward him with 500 coins. Dokja understands that while some constellations dislike him, others are starting to support him. He thinks about the constellations and hopes they all enjoy the events, knowing that they will eventually pay the price for their entertainment with their own lives. Sangha approaches Dokja and asks if he is okay. He responds by apologizing because he could not save the old woman. Sangha looks worried and seems like she wants to say something, but she stops herself. Dokja notices and asks her what it is. She hesitates and dismisses it, saying, "It is nothing." Instead, she thanks Dokja for throwing the cage toward her earlier. Dokja responds that what happened earlier was a coincidence and will not happen again. He cannot tell exactly what Sangha is thinking, but he believes she is smart enough to survive in this chaotic world. He feels confident that she probably understands his words. Dokja reflects on his decisions and acknowledges that his choices caused some people to survive while others died. He does not feel deserving of the gratitude from those who made it through. However, he admits to himself that having 5 survivors is more than he expected. He then turns his attention to the boy, Jillian Lee. Dokja remembers the moment he gave the insect to the child. Realizing the dangers of the world, Dokja asks the boy if he wants to live. When Jillian nods, Dokja tells him they should team up. Dokja admits to himself that his actions are not driven by sympathy. If he had to name his true motive, he would call it hypocrisy. A status window appears showing that a few constellations are impressed with Dokja's actions. As a reward, they send him 200 coins. Dokja thinks that pretending to care might be a low move, but he justifies it because he also wants to survive. Knowing what lies ahead, he decides that gaining the attention of the constellations is crucial for his survival. The Dokkaebi comments on how many interesting things have happened during the day. He also mentions that someone in the next cabin is completely insane. Myongo Han, one of the survivors, asks the Dokkaebi if they will now be allowed to leave since they have done everything required in this scenario. Dokja observes Myongo and wonders why someone as wealthy as him is even taking the subway. It seems out of character for someone like Myongo to be in such a situation. The Dokkaebi responds with a sly smile and asks Myongo if he is sure about wanting to leave. Myongo, looking at the monsters outside, is left speechless and unable to answer. The Dokkaebi seems impressed by the fact that so many people survived the first scenario in this cabin. The Dokkaebi announces that every difficulty deserves a reward. He explains that the reward for completing the first scenario is the ability to receive sponsorships from constellations. Most survivors react with confusion, but Dokja stays calm. He is the only one who already knows about the sponsorship system. The Dokkaebi warns them that they are still very weak. He tells them they wouldn't even survive an encounter with a weak ground mouse, let alone a kruk, if they continue in their current state. However, he adds that there are powerful beings in this world who feel pity for them and want to sponsor them. Dokja notices that he has 4 sponsors to choose from: Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, Demonic Judge of Fire, Secretive Plotter, and Prisoner of the Golden Headband. Sangha calls out to him, mentioning that 2 strange options have suddenly appeared on her own interface. To avoid raising suspicions, Dokja lies and says he does not know anything about it. He suggests she think of the process as an aptitude test. The sponsor selection is a system in which constellations, watching through the Dokkaebi channel, choose humans they want to support as avatars. In his case, 4 constellations have shown interest in sponsoring him, though their real names remain hidden. Dokja compares his situation to the protagonist in Tusa, who initially had 5 sponsor options. 4 options seem significant, and he is not disappointed. He knows that the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon leads the faction called Black Cloud. This constellation grants its avatar exceptional attack power, making it the strongest choice for early scenarios that demand physical strength and combat ability. However, Dokja also knows the risks. The more this constellation's power is used, the more it corrupts the mind of his avatar. Over time, its contractor would lose control and become a violent murderer. This constellation usually supports edgelord attributes. Feeling uneasy about the risks associated with this constellation, Dokja decides to exclude it. The second option, the Demonic Judge of Fire, amazes Dokja. At first glance, the name suggests a demonic being. However, Dokja knows this is misleading. Despite the word demonic, the constellation is not a demon. The combination of fire and judge reveals its identity. It is Archangel Uriel, who passes judgment through flames. The third option, secretive plotter, catches Dokja's attention. This constellation is unfamiliar to him. Dokja realizes he might understand its nature if he had read more of Tuza. The fourth and final option is the prisoner of the golden headband. Dokja is shocked to see this constellation appear so early. He doubts his own eyes several times before accepting that it is real. At first, the name seems negative. However, Dokja focuses on the proper noun, golden headband, known as the smallest prison in the world. Fans of Journey to the West would recognize this constellation as Sun Wukong, the handsome monkey king, also called the Great Sage, Heaven's Equal. Sun Wukong is famous for his golden gaze and fiery eyes. As the selection time nears its end, Dokja decides not to choose any constellation. His reasoning is simple. He knows that sponsor contracts are never fair deals. Furthermore, he is aware that there are ways to become strong without relying on a constellation. When the sponsor selection ends, the Dokkaebi announces that someone has made an unusual choice. For a brief moment, he looks directly at Dokja. The Dokkaebi then informs the survivors that they will have a short 10-minute break while he prepares the next scenario. After the Dokkaebi disappears, Dokja tells the others to gather around. Although hesitant at first, they eventually comply. Hyunsung Lee is the first to step forward. He introduces himself to Dokja and shakes his hand. Dokja notices that Hyunsung has a firm grip, but he is not surprised by this. After all, Hyunsung was the tanker in the early stages of Tuza. This made Dokja want to recruit him. Hyunsung praises Dokja for his earlier actions, saying they would likely have died without his intervention. Before Dokja can respond, Myango suddenly grabs his shoulder and questions how Dokja knows him. Dokja responds by calling him by his name, which surprises Myango. Myango insists that Dokja should address him more formally as Mr. Han, but Dokja points out that they are no longer in a workplace environment. Myango continues rambling nonsense until Dokja firmly tells him to stop and focus on the reality of their situation. Dokja realizes it is not just Myango who needs to wake up, everyone does. He states that the situation is no joke, and by now they all must understand how serious it is. Hyunsung adds that what they are experiencing feels similar to a novel he once read during night shifts. He still struggles to believe it is real and wonders if it might be a dream. He then asks Dokja if he has any idea what they should do next. Dokja responds that their priority is to leave the subway. His statement shocks the survivors. As they react, a loud roar from the sea monster echoes through the window, adding to their fear. Some start complaining, calling Dokja's idea crazy. Before they can continue, a loud boom comes from the other side of the subway door, cutting through their protests. The survivors freeze, confused and terrified, wondering what is happening. Dokja considers the possibility that the next scenario has already started, but quickly dismisses the idea since the Dokkaebi has not yet returned. He concludes that the person on the other side of the door must be the sole survivor of subway cabin 3707. The door shakes violently as a black boot slams against it repeatedly. Dokja stares grimly at the door and feels certain about the identity of the person behind it. In his mind, it becomes clear. This is the true protagonist of the story. Dokja convinces Hyunsung that they need to leave immediately. He warns that if they stay, they will all die before the next scenario begins. The relentless sound of the door being kicked adds urgency to his words. Hyunsung hesitates, unsure if the person behind the door is truly an enemy. Dokja clarifies that the survivor behind that door is the one who killed everyone in their cabin and asks if anyone is eager to meet such a person. Hearing this, the group quickly starts searching for a way out. With the scenario over, the invisible force field blocking their escape has vanished. However, they still need to find a working door. 3 of the 8 doors in the cabin remain unchecked. Just as the menacing sound of the door being kicked grows louder, fear spreads through the group. Even Dokja feels uneasy as he watches the door from the next cabin, which looks ready to break open. Suddenly, Sangha finds a slightly open door. Hyunsung points out that the door is broken, but Dokja asserts it is still their best option. He briefly glances at his status window and notes that he has 4,700 coins left. He considers spending coins but decides against it, knowing that using them too early could be risky. Instead, Dokja asks Hyunsung to use his strength to open the door. To be sure, Dokja checks Hyunsung's profile using his skill and feels relieved to see that Hyunsung's supporting constellation attributes match what was described in the novel. Hyunsung mentions owning a power, but is clear he has no idea how to use it. Dokja tells Hyunsung to imagine himself using the power. Hyunsung is doubtful but follows the suggestion. Hyunsung grabs the door with his hands, his biceps swelling with effort as he forces it open. The scene reveals the power of the Great Mountain Push. Dokja knows that Great Mountain Push is not a skill but a stigma, a power granted by a constellation. However, to avoid drawing suspicion, Dokja deliberately uses the word skill when talking to Hyunsung instead of calling it a stigma. A system notification appears stating that Hyunsung has started to trust Dokja. It also mentions that Dokja's understanding of Hyunsung's character has increased. After Hyunsung opens the door, Dokja and the others rush toward the bridge. Dokja thinks about the steel door connecting to subway cabin 3707 and how it will likely break soon. However, he reminds himself that the steel door is not the real problem. Dokja's thoughts are interrupted when he sees the Dokkaebi floating in front of them. The Dokkaebi looks angry and accuses the survivors of not listening to him and leaving their cabin too early. He explains that he has not finished preparing for the next scenario. Mayang, though, panics, clutching his head as if it might explode, and says they should have stayed inside. The Dokkaebi sighs, then snaps his fingers. He declares that he has no choice but to proceed since the survivors are already outside. A status window appears, announcing the start of the second scenario. The second scenario is an E difficulty sub-scenario. The goal is to cross the collapsing bridge and reach Oksu Station within 20 minutes. The reward for clearing the scenario is 200 coins, but the penalty for failure is a mystery. Without hesitation, Dokja starts running toward the station. Sangha hesitates and calls out to Dokja, pointing out that the bridge has not collapsed yet. Dokja tells her not to worry and to focus on running. He knows she is right. The bridge is still intact. However, he also understands the scenario description. The bridge is not broken yet, but it will break. The Dokkaebi had given them a preparation time of 10 minutes, but they escaped 3 minutes earlier. Dokja observes the group as they run. Hyunsung leaves with Gilleong beside him. Dokja notes that Hyunsung is incredibly strong, a natural powerhouse who has not even invested coins in his stats. Yet the combined strength, physique, and agility of Hyunsung exceeds 23. Mayang, though, runs next with Sunma following behind him. Dokja stays at the rear, keeping an eye on the group. He thinks they might have a chance to reach the station in time. Suddenly, Mayang, though, notices something in the water. A whirlpool forms, and from it emerges a massive sea monster, a sea serpent, or perhaps even a sea commander, based on its enormous size. The ichthyosaur roars loudly, sending chills through the group. Dokja thinks to himself that the ichthyosaur, having never targeted avatars earlier in the story, must have appeared to destroy the bridge. He estimates that they are about 200 meters away from the bridge and should be able to reach it before it collapses given their speed. However, Dokja feels uneasy. The Dokkaebi has other plans. The Dokkaebi announces that the game would not be fun if it were too easy. So he decides to change the scenario's difficulty from E to D inside the train cabin. A black aether, the wicked thoughts of the dead, begins to possess the dead bodies and bring them back to life. Soon after, there is a noise and Sangha is the first to notice it. Zombie-like figures start appearing in large waves. Some of them are people who were in the same carriage as the survivors. Hyunsung and the kid manage to reach Oksu Station safely, but they worry for Dokja and the others, who are now surrounded by zombies. A distant roar interrupts their thoughts. Dokja looks up and immediately orders everyone to get down. At that moment, the ichthyosaur takes a massive bite out of the bridge, completely severing it. Samna calls out to Dokja as he struggles to stand. When he regains his balance, he is shocked to see the bridge has been destroyed. He is, however, surprised that Mayangdo and Sangha have survived. Dokja notices the kid and Hyunsung shouting something, though he cannot hear them. He wonders what will happen next when a message suddenly appears. It states that someone has received the favor of a constellation and activated Deus Ex Machina. At that moment, a brilliant bridge made of light forms across the remnants of the collapsed Dongo Bridge. The bridge in front of them was the bridge of even numbers, which could only be crossed by an even number of people. If an odd number of people tried to cross, the bridge would collapse. Sangha suddenly told Dokja that something had appeared on her head. Dokja was in awe, wondering if Sangha's supporting constellation had made a risky move by intervening in the scenario. However, Dokja knew that such interventions were rare even in Tuza. He wondered what kind of constellation could be supporting her. So he decided to take a look at Sangha's character profile. But when he checked, he found that he couldn't access it, indicating that Sangha had a special constellation supporting her, one that also provided her with a mental barrier. Sangha then shouted at him, snapping his attention to the situation. Dokja instinctively leaned forward just as a familiar bloody fist covered in energy flew through the air, narrowly missing his head. Without thinking, he kicked the attacker, sending them flying several feet away. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Dokja instantly recognized the attacker. A Tier 9 humanoid demon. A demonic person. These were human mutants infected with black aether. While demonic people were similar to zombies, they were much more dangerous if their hosts had significant power. And of all people, it had to be Namwoon. Dokja quickly activated his Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint skill. But when he tried to target the demon, he found that it had no consciousness, so his skill was automatically deactivated. In turn, Dokja was slow to dodge the attack, and he felt a sharp pain as the demon's claws scratched his left arm. The pain intensified, but there was no time to react. His only focus now was to somehow get across the bridge of even numbers. However, with 3 people on the bridge, they were already at a disadvantage. Dokja turned around about to speak when he saw Myeongo carrying Sangha. He froze, dumbfounded by the sight. Myeongo immediately ran off, leaving Dokja behind. His anger flared. He couldn't believe Myeongo had abandoned him like this. A system message suddenly appeared, stating that the secretive plotter was impressed by how easily Dokja could be tricked. Meanwhile, the demonic judge of fire was moved by Dokja's selflessness and gifted him 100 coins. Frustrated, Dokja tried to use his character profile skill on Myeongo, but it still didn't work. It was then that he realized Myeongo and Sangha weren't characters from Tusa. The rules of the game didn't apply to them. Just then, Zombie Namwoon roared, summoning hordes of zombies to swarm Dokja. The zombies charged at him, and he had to think quickly. How could he cross the bridge while fighting them off? He considered dragging a demon across the bridge with him, but he quickly dismissed the idea, knowing it was unlikely to work. A sudden notification flashed in his vision. Only 15 minutes remained until the scenario ended. The Dokkaebi, watching the chaos unfold, casually observed Dokja's struggle. The Dokkaebi then commented that Dokja was doing well and offered Constellations to help him, but none responded. As Dokja fought with all his might against the zombies, his friends watched from the distance, concern evident on their faces. His strength was fading, and soon he found himself cornered. If he stepped back, he would fall into the sea. If he moved forward, he'd be facing the horde of zombies head-on. Trapped in his predicament, Dokja realized that this might be the end. He couldn't help but think that it wouldn't have been so difficult if he had just one combat skill. Suddenly, a system message flashed across Dokja's vision, stating that his bookmark skill had been activated. A massive book-like hologram materialized before him, and he stared at it, wondering what purpose the bookmark served. A new message popped up listing the bookmark characters: Delusional Demon Namwoon, Steelblade Hyunsung Lee, and an empty slot. Dokja frowned. He had read over 3,000 episodes of Tusa, but he had never encountered any mention of a bookmark skill. Despite his confusion, his instincts kicked in, and he quickly grasped how it worked. Just then, Zombie Namwoon roared and charged at him, followed closely by the other zombies. In response, Dokja didn't hesitate. He activated bookmark number 1. A system message appeared, notifying him that the activation time had been shortened due to his low understanding of Namwoon's character. But it was enough. Dokja successfully activated Grimdark Awakening Level 1. He tightened his grip on his knife just as Zombie Namwoon lunged at him. With one swift motion, Dokja unleashed the skill, and the zombie version of Namwoon fell in a single strike, killed with a devastating blow. The zombie let out a horrified scream before whispering, "He doesn't want to die." Dokja watched in silence as Namwoon's body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. A message flashed indicating that Dokja's understanding of Namwoon's character had increased and the bookmark skill deactivated. With only 10 minutes and 11 seconds remaining, the hordes of zombies closed in around Dokja, but he had never intended to deal with them alone. Though a bit late, the protagonist's timely entrance was something he'd been waiting for. In the distance, a deafening explosion rang out, a sound Dokja had been anticipating. The zombies paused, sensing something was wrong, and began to turn in the direction of the blast. But it was too late. The zombies were sent flying in a straight line as if a tank had plowed through them, clearing the way. Dokja smirked as he saw the source of the destruction. A man in all black, walking calmly through the chaos. Yoo Joonghyuk, the man in the black robe, strolled toward Dokja with a cold, commanding presence. His golden eyes glinted menacingly as he asked him who is he. A chill ran down his spine. Dokja knew he wouldn't stand a chance if it came to a confrontation with Junghyuk. Reacting instantly, Dokja activated his profiling skill. Before he could process any more, Junghyuk raised his hand, effortlessly grabbing Dokja by the neck. Dokja was completely at his mercy, suspended over the edge of the bridge, his breath cut off. Junghyuk asks him how he was still alive. Dokja struggles to free himself from Junghyuk's strong grip. He realizes that he is the living proof of the first method in Tusa. He knows Junghyuk as the regressor, the person who will start the events that will turn the world upside down. While this happens, on the other side of the broken bridge, Hyunsung tries to understand what is happening. However, he cannot get through because there is a barrier similar to the one in the subway. This makes Sangha worried about Dokja, who is still hanging in the air. Junghyuk asks him again for his name, which makes Dokja think that Junghyuk is really a self-centered protagonist. Finally, Dokja tells him his name. Junghyuk says that his name is strange. Dokja decides to act smart, but this only leads to Junghyuk punching him in the stomach. Dokja is surprised by the punch. Junghyuk comments that Dokja has a strong body and says that Dokja has already figured out how to use the coins. When Dokja tries to talk back, he gets punched again. This makes Dokja wonder how Junghyuk is so strong, especially since they have only finished one main scenario and are now working on a sub-scenario. Junghyuk tells Dokja to stop talking and just answer the questions. Dokja feels this is the worst situation he could be in and hopes it never happens again. After 3 regressions, Junghyuk has become the most dangerous character in Tusa. Junghyuk asks Dokja once more if he will comply, and Dokja calmly replies, "Fine." Junghyuk punches Dokja again, but this time Dokja blocks the punch. Junghyuk is surprised that his punch has been stopped. They stare at each other for a moment, and Dokja smiles. He deliberately mentions his skills as a pro gamer. Then he tells Junghyuk that he is younger, so Junghyuk should show him some respect. This makes Junghyuk wary of Dokja. He asks if Dokja knows him. Dokja lies and says he knows him because he worked at a game company. He also says Junghyuk is pretty famous, and that he was one of his fans. Dokja knows that Junghyuk's fame is just part of the story in the novel, but he isn't lying when he says he was once a fan. Dokja thinks about his complicated feelings toward Junghyuk. He realizes he has mixed emotions having followed Junghyuk through all 3,000 episodes. Junghyuk responds that he hasn't heard that in a while and that he will forgive Dokja for being rude. However, Junghyuk says this won't change anything. Dokja understands the situation. Junghyuk tells him that he only has one question for him. How did he survive the subway? Dokja tries to think quickly about what he can say to make Junghyuk let him live. A system message informs Dokja that his understanding of Junghyuk has increased and he has now grasped his character. Another system message appears saying that Dokja has unlocked level 2 of his personal skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. When Dokja activates the skill, he is surprised to discover that he can now read Junghyuk's mind. He hears that Junghyuk will kill him if he is a threat. Dokja smirks, thinking he can use this new skill against Junghyuk. He answers Junghyuk's question, saying that he survived by clearing the scenario through killing insects. This surprises Junghyuk. Dokja explains that he was lucky to have seen the kid with the bugs who had fallen due to the explosion in the cabin ahead of them. Junghyuk begins to wonder if the future has changed. Junghyuk thinks about his destroyed cabin with dead bodies on the floor. He believes the difference might be because he started by killing them with an explosion, unlike in his previous runs. Junghyuk notices something strange about Dokja. As the world had turned upside down, Dokja is unusually calm. He concludes that he must have killed Namwoon, which makes him seem dangerous to Junghyuk. Dokja then tells Junghyuk to let him go if he's done with his questions and suggests they cross the bridge together to Oksu Station because time is running out. But Junghyuk has another thought. Everything fits too perfectly. Golden light shines from his right eye. Dokja recognizes the skill Junghyuk is using and becomes alert. He knows that the Eye of the Sage is a powerful skill. The best way to uncover someone's traits and secrets is the best detection skill. Junghyuk grabs Dokja with both hands while Dokja wonders why he's not using the Eye of the Sage. He thinks it might be for the best since he doesn't even know his own attributes or skills. If Junghyuk finds out, he would also want to know. Suddenly, a system message appears saying that Dokja's personal skill, the Fourth Wall, has been activated and blocked the Eye of Sage. This shocked Junghyuk, and with only 2 minutes left in the sub-scenario, Junghyuk asks aggressively what Dokja is. Dokja is shocked. He can't believe that he has a skill capable of blocking Eye of the Sage. Junghyuk thinks he must kill Dokja now, but since Dokja can read his mind, he tells him to wait. Dokja is frustrated with himself for making things more complicated. He knows Junghyuk will never believe him, so he changes his approach. He tells Junghyuk that he needs a reliable ally and reminds him that he needs help to clear Scenario 46. Junghyuk asks how Dokja knows about the scenario and if he is also a regressor. Dokja replies that it doesn't matter who he is right now. What matters is what he can do for Junghyuk. Junghyuk then realizes that Dokja isn't a regressor, since if he were, he would already know him. Dokja tells him that he knows the future, a future that Junghyuk doesn't know. Hearing this, Junghyuk quickly uses his skill to check for lies. The result shows that Dokja is telling the truth. Junghyuk is shocked and steps back. He wonders if there is another prophet in Korea besides Anna Croft. The prophet trait is the only one in Tusa that allows someone to see the future and blocks detection skills from working. Dokja knows that only one person in the world of Tusa has the prophet trait. Junghyuk asks Dokja if he can use future sight. Dokja gives a vague answer. When Junghyuk asks if Dokja knew he would be there, Dokja confirms it. Meanwhile, the city behind them continues to burn and a sea monster swarms the river. Dokja tells Jung Heewon that he knows about his special power and what will happen in the future. In his memories, regressors live their lives repeatedly and know what will happen. However, they can influence their future by changing the present. Dokja then offers to be Jung Heewon's companion. Since Dokja is the only one who can read the story, he will act as Jung Heewon's prophet to help him understand the future better. Jung Heewon grits his teeth. He thinks that what Dokja says is true, not just for Scenario 46, but also for fighting Zarathustra. However, he wonders if he can trust Dokja. Jung Heewon thinks about it for a long time, and with only 40 seconds left until the end of the scenario, he decides to make Dokja his companion. Suddenly, Jung Heewon grabs Dokja and drags him toward the bridge. Dokja coughs and tells him to let go, but Jung Heewon pulls him harder. They cross the broken bridge with the help of Deus Ex Machina. The zombies are growling as they cross. Meanwhile, Sangha, Hyunsung, and Ji-leong wait for Dokja at the station. Jung Heewon keeps dragging Dokja by the collar of his shirt. Dokja feels relief knowing that he is safe again. He can't believe he managed to get the regressor to agree with him. Dokja is exhausted from focusing so hard, so his omniscient reader's viewpoint skill stops working on its own. Dokja feels anxious when he notices that his skill is being deactivated, but he quickly realizes that he has already done everything he could and has convinced Jung Heewon. He thinks that he is safe now because he has crossed the bridge. Behind the veil, Dokja's friend can see Jung Heewon stopping him and asking if he is a prophet, someone who can see the future. Dokja gets a bad feeling. His instincts tell him that something is wrong. Suddenly, Jung Heewon lifts him up and moves toward the end of the bridge. There, a sea monster waits, ready to eat him. Dokja's face changes as he feels fear. Jung Heewon asks if Dokja will let go and fall into the sea monster's mouth. In his mind, Dokja is sure that Jung Heewon is a psychopath. He closes his eyes tightly. Dokja believes that he is the only one who truly understands Jung Heewon, and he wonders if this Jung Heewon is the same one he has read about. Then he decides to speak. He tells Jung Heewon that he has something to say first, which surprises Jung Heewon. They stare at each other. Dokja says that since he is willing to team up with Jung Heewon should also promise to work with him. Jung Heewon gets what he wants. He asks Dokja for an answer. With a grin, Dokja calls him an idiot and tells him to let him go and go away. Jung Heewon lets go of Dokja's hand. Dokja falls with a loud scream. As he falls, he looks up and sees Jung Heewon standing at the edge watching him fall. Jung Heewon smiles and says he believes that Dokja is really a prophet. Dokja is shocked. Just before he is eaten by the sea monster, he smiles and curses Jung Heewon. The sea monster snaps its jaws with a loud sound. A notification appears saying that Dokja has failed to clear the scenario. Meanwhile, Dokja is drowning inside the sea monster's mouth. He struggles to hold his breath, knowing he must keep going and cannot faint. He manages to get out of the water, coughing and retching. He realizes he has made it to the monster's stomach without being torn apart or eaten. He then searches his inner pocket, still breathing heavily. When he finds his phone, he turns on the flashlight to see around him. To his horror, he sees a sea of dead bodies, cars, and pieces of the bridge. The inside of the monster's stomach is even worse than he imagined. Dokja swims towards a flat, floating stone and thinks to himself that Jung Heewon is a psychopath. Despite this, Dokja understands why Jung Heewon did it. Dokja believes that the word companion carries great weight for Jung Heewon. After failing his first round of regression, Jung Heewon has never had a real companion. He only sees humans as subordinates or enemies. Dokja thinks that this was probably a test, where Jung Heewon wanted him to prove himself as an equal. Dokja sits casually on the floating stone, closes his eyes, and checks his message log. There are several messages and a few constellations want to sponsor him. This might be because of the final conversation he had with Jung Heewon. Suddenly, the stomach of the sea monster shakes, signaling that it is moving. Dokja holds the stone tightly, startled by the sudden movement. Dokja remembers that, according to Tusa, the stomachs of ichthyosaurs start secreting acid 3 minutes after they eat. This means he doesn't have much time left. Suddenly, a bright flash appears behind him and the Dokkaebi arrives. Dokja is surprised by its appearance. Dokkaebi realizes that Dokja is not flustered at all, even in this dangerous situation. Dokja replies that he has been waiting for the Dokkaebi, which confuses it. Dokja looks at the Dokkaebi and thinks to himself that not only will he escape from the sea monster's stomach, but he will also gain the power to stand as Jung Heewon's equal. He believes that Jung Heewon will have no choice but to accept him as his companion. Meanwhile, on the edge of the bridge, Jung Heewon stands still and watches the sea monster swim away. After a while, he turns around and leaves. Back inside the sea monster's stomach, the Dokkaebi asks Dokja if he was really waiting for it. Dokja responds that he was. He then tells the Dokkaebi that it needs to take his coins as a penalty for failing the scenario. The Dokkaebi becomes even more confused. The Dokkaebi asks why Dokja wants to pay with coins instead of his life. Dokja explains that if the Dokkaebi was going to kill him, the punishment would have said death, not the mystery penalty. He adds that it means there is room for negotiation. Just then, the Dokkaebi's eyes turn red. However, the Dokkaebi laughs and tells Dokja that it is interesting and impressive how he managed to figure this out from such a small clue. It says that it is no wonder all the constellations are watching him. Then the Dokkaebi informs Dokja that the price to save his life is 5,100 coins. Dokja looks at the coins he has and realizes it is exactly the amount the Dokkaebi is asking for. He feels agitated. Dokja tells the Dokkaebi that the price is too high. The Dokkaebi responds that Dokja can die, then calmly says that if Dokja doesn't want to pay, they can end things right there. However, the Dokkaebi does not expect Dokja to dare to kill him. The Dokkaebi is shocked by what Dokja says as he challenges the Dokkaebi again to kill him. The Dokkaebi stands frozen, his eyes glowing red. Dokja tells him that he cannot kill him because he is attracting attention. He smiles, knowing that the constellations are watching and enjoying the scene, and that the Dokkaebi would not have come all the way there just to kill him. The Dokkaebi becomes angry and glares at Dokja, asking what he is trying to do. Dokja then calls in a low-grade Dokkaebi named Byeong. This stops the Dokkaebi from speaking. Dokja asks Byeong how his job as a streamer is going. Byeong trembles and stutters, asking how a human could know his name. But Dokja ignores him and continues, saying that his channel isn't doing well because the constellations have been cheap lately. The system sends a message telling Dokja that some constellations are curious about who he is. Then another system message appears, saying that Dokja's plan shines with the secretive plotter. Dokja whispers to Byeong, asking him to turn off the channel for a moment so they can talk. Byeong agrees and turns off the stream. Once the stream is off, Byeong asks Dokja how he knows about the star stream when he is just a human. In Dokja's memory, the star stream is a broadcast that spans the cosmos. It's a place where constellations from distant galaxies sign up, and the actors in the stream are people like Dokja. Dokkaebi are known as streamers and act as mediators between the constellations and the actors by telling their stories. Dokja, sitting casually, tells Byeong that it doesn't matter how he knows. Without giving Byeong a chance to respond, Dokja asks if Byeong wants to become the Dokkaebi king and beat other streamers like Dokgak and Gildal to be the best streamer ever. Dokja promises to make him the Dokkaebi king if he agrees to sign a contract with him. Byeong is stunned by what Dokja says. After a short moment, he starts laughing, telling Dokja that he has lost his mind. Byeong adds that he should have known something was off when Dokja turned down all the offers from the constellations. Byeong is right because Dokja didn't choose a constellation during the sponsor selection before the sub-scenario. Byeong tells Dokja that he doesn't know how Dokja knows about the star stream, but he can't accept the offer because he is a Dokkaebi and not a constellation. This means he can't support him. Dokja explains that he never asked Byeong to sponsor him, which leaves Byeong confused. Dokja clears up the misunderstanding, saying that he doesn't want Byeong's power but his channel, along with a stream contract. Dokja mentions the constellation's Dokkaebi stream contract. In this contract, a Dokkaebi can show the avatar of a constellation on their channel in exchange for a certain number of coins. The Dokkaebi who owns the channel gets a share of the coins the avatar earns. This idea makes Byeong laugh. Then, with his red eyes glowing in anger on his face, Byeong questions how a mere human dares to mention the Starstream contract, especially someone like Dokja, who doesn't even have a supporting constellation. Dokja explains that this is exactly why Byeong should take his offer, which leaves Byeong confused. He asks Dokja why constellations are even part of the Starstream feeds. Dokja knows that there are two main groups in the Starstream. One group likes to switch stations for an adrenaline rush. The second group is made up of avatar sponsors who are looking for avatars to support. Dokja suggests that Byeong should aim to thrill or attract avatar seekers to make his channel successful. Byeong, angry, asks why Dokja cares so much. Dokja calls Byeong dense and criticizes his low subscription numbers. He continues, asking Byeong to consider an avatar who turned down the supporting constellation. This avatar is able to outperform everyone else without needing a constellation. Hearing this, Byeong realizes what Dokja means. Dokja confirms that's the reason he didn't choose a supporting constellation. Dokja ends the negotiation by making it clear that he knows the constellations are eager to discover the avatar who dared to challenge the regressor. Meanwhile, Byeong stares in his messages in pure panic. His stress levels shoot through the roof as he scolds Dokja, trying to remind him of a simple fact: avatars backed by constellations always have the upper hand against those who don't. That's just how the system works. Dokja doesn't bother to argue. Instead, he tells Byeong that this is exactly what he plans to prove from now on. Without giving the stressed-out Dokkaebi a chance to complain, he tells him to shut up and follow orders. Then he throws in a promise he will make Beyong the Dokkaebi king. Beyong's tiny brain struggles to process everything and he hesitates, torn between the risk and the reward. Meanwhile, Dokja just smiles, watching Beyong suffer through his decision-making process. Eventually, the Dokkaebi gives in and begins the checkout process, but Dokja immediately stops him when he tries to charge 5,100 coins. He argues that he hasn't actually failed the scenario yet, so the charge is unnecessary. Dokja gets up, his stone trembling as if reacting to his will. With complete confidence, he declares that he will fulfill the condition. Without waiting for Beyong's approval, he demands that the channel be opened. The Dokkaebi, still confused and overwhelmed, stares at him like he's lost his mind. But Dokja remains unfazed. He simply points out that things are about to begin. Before Beyong can process anything, a system notification appears for both of them. A hidden scenario has arrived. Beyong looks like he's about to pass out, but Dokja, as usual, stays completely calm. The new challenge is an A-difficulty hidden scenario called Commander Slayer. The goal is to kill the Sea Commander Ichthyosaur and escape within 10 days. Failure means death. Success comes with a reward of 9,000 coins. And as soon as the channel opens, Beyong scrambles to deal with the constellations flooding his live stream, while Dokja focuses on the more important matter, checking the limited items in the Dokkaebi shop, carefully considering his next move. Dokja struggles to find the search feature in the Dokkaebi shop, which is incredibly inconvenient since he doesn't have time to scroll through an endless list of overpriced junk. Earlier, he had forced Beyong to open the shop, taking advantage of the fact that it only becomes accessible while the channel is live. That explains why Beyong is currently busy rambling through explanations while juggling his other stress, Constellations bombarding his stream. In the middle of Beyong's meltdown, Dokja casually asks for help. The Dokkaebi, looking like he just lost the last shred of hope he had left, informs him that the search button is tucked away in the bottom right corner. Dokja quickly types in Ancient Dragon, catching Beyong off guard. The Dokkaebi stares at him, wondering how this guy even knows about such rare items. Dokja, being the master of nonsense that he is, simply throws out an excuse, claiming he just picked a cool-sounding name at random. Not that it matters, because the item is already sold out. Dokja feels a tiny pang of disappointment, remembering that, according to Tessa, the lucky buyer was some Italian guy whose rich sponsor snatched it up for him. With no time to dwell on it, Dokja moves on and searches for the Archdemon's eyeball and the White Star weapon aura. Once again, his knowledge leaves Beyong speechless. At this point, the Dokkaebi should really stop being surprised by Dokja pulling information out of nowhere. Instead of anything fancy, Dokja ends up purchasing 4 bags of seahorse mucus and 4 thorns for a total of 800 coins. Beyong, confused and slightly disgusted, demands to know what Dokja plans to do with such weird items. Dokja, in classic fashion, refuses to explain, making it clear that Beyong will just have to wait and see. Of course, he acknowledges the warning there are no refunds. Meanwhile, the Constellations react. The secretive plotter shows interest in Dokja's latest scheme, while the abyssal black flame dragon, as expected, remains committed to hating every single thing Dokja does. Beyong, finally shutting off the stream, brings up the pending offer again. Dokja, without a hint of doubt, tells him that they'll negotiate the contract after clearing the scenario. Beyong, clearly fed up but also kind of curious, decides to leave and see if Dokja can actually survive this hidden scenario. Before he leaves, he mutters something about Dokja being arrogant. Dokja, unfazed, brushes him off with full confidence. Beyong, for once, actually wishes Dokja luck before snapping his fingers and disappearing in a flash of light. The brightness hits Dokja right in the face, making him squint and block his eyes. Once the annoying Dokkaebi finally vanishes, he pulls out his phone, checks the time, and confirms what he already suspected. There isn't much time left before the stomach acid floods the place. Without wasting another second, he paddles toward the massive body of the Ichthyosaur. As he gets closer, he pulls out a small pouch, takes out the seahorse mucus, and smears it onto the thorn. The smell alone is enough to make a lesser man gag, but Dokja barely reacts. Turning his attention back, he sees the inevitable. The stomach acid is about to pour in. The moment the acidic liquid starts spreading, Dokja's grip on the thorn tightens. There's no turning back now. If he hesitates, he'll be dissolved into nothing in seconds. With every bit of strength he has, he drives the thorn into the Ichthyosaur's stomach, determined to get out of this disgusting mess alive. Meanwhile, the outside world is in complete chaos. 4 meteorites crash onto the Earth, setting the entire city on fire. The sea turns into a nightmare as monsters crawl out, adding to the destruction. Among them, one of the Ichthyosaurs suddenly flinches and lets out an ear-splitting roar. Inside its body, the stomach acid churns violently, burning through anything unfortunate enough to be caught in it, including lifeless corpses that never had a chance. Despite everything, Dokja manages to keep himself alive. Using the thorns as footholds, he climbs upward, avoiding the rising acid. Every breath feels heavier, his body screams in exhaustion, and his mind starts to waver. He struggles to keep track of time, wondering if he's made a mistake. The doubt creeps in, whispering that maybe he overestimated himself. After all, he isn't some chosen hero, just a reader, a nobody who somehow ended up inside the story. His vision begins to blur, the light in his eyes dimming, but the scenario isn't over yet. Dokja blinks, his body overwhelmed with exhaustion, and a heavy wave of sleepiness washes over him. He forces himself to stay awake, reminding himself that this isn't a dream, though he really wishes it were. His old life wasn't exactly great, but at least he didn't have to fight for survival inside the stomach of an overgrown sea monster. As the ichthyosaur's body begins to dry up, the area suddenly lights up with bursts of static, the blinding flashes cutting through the darkness. Dokja doesn't move. His hands remain clenched around the thorn, his breath coming out in ragged gasps as his body shakes from sheer effort. Byung reappears, staring in disbelief. The Dokkaebi actually looks impressed, probably shocked that Dokja is still breathing after pulling off another reckless stunt. A system notification appears, announcing that several constellations are entertained by Dokja's ability to stay alive despite having the survival instincts of a sleep-deprived student cramming for finals. As a result, they toss him a pity reward of 100 coins. On the fourth day of the hidden scenario, Byung finally acknowledges the absurdity of Dokja's plan, especially the unexpected way he used the thorns. However, before anything else can be said, Dokja's body gives up. His vision blacks out and he collapses with a dull thud. At the same time, the hidden scenario officially comes to an end. The ichthyosaur lies dead, and the system announces the rewards. Dokja receives 9,000 coins for clearing the scenario, along with an extra 1,000 coins as a special achievement. Apparently, he is the first person to take down a Tier 7 sea monster. He would probably feel proud of that if he weren't currently sprawled inside the remains of the beast, struggling to catch his breath. Meanwhile, Byung, having recovered from his shock, rambles about stone hogs, explaining how they live on shores and survive by feeding on tiny sea creatures. Their signature thorns pierce prey and drain them dry. He stares at the thorns stuck inside the ichthyosaur, still unable to believe that someone actually thought to use it as a weapon against a massive sea monster. Another system notification appears, revealing that some constellations are grinning, clearly amused. They seem to understand exactly why Dokja did what he did. Some constellations, being the nosy spectators they are, demand that Dokja explain his plans so they can keep up with his next move. They clearly don't trust him to just sit quietly and survive like a normal person. Meanwhile, Byung helps Dokja sit up, still reeling from the fact that the mucus from a hammer seahorse actually protected him from the ichthyosaur's stomach acid. Dokja had thought ahead and covered himself in the hammer seahorse's mucus before using the stone hog's thorn. It wasn't exactly a pleasant experience, but it got the job done. He even managed to satisfy his hunger by absorbing the ichthyosaur's bodily fluids through the thorn, which sounds disgusting, but hey, survival isn't glamorous. His stamina stat even increases from 11 to 12, though it's still barely above pathetic. To clear up Byung's confusion, Dokja explains that hammer seahorses produce a special mucus to protect themselves from ichthyosaurs, their natural predators. That same mucus is what allowed him to survive the acid, though it wasn't completely painless. He definitely felt it, just not enough to dissolve into a puddle. Thankfully, his fourth wall skill dulls the worst of the pain, letting him push through it. Byung, on the other hand, is having the time of his life watching this ridiculous survival drama unfold. He gets so excited that he even asks the constellations if they're enjoying the show. Dokja, already done with everything, pulls himself to his feet and demands that Byung open the Dokkaebi shop. Later, he takes one of his thorns and drives it into the wall, only to stumble upon something unexpected, the ichthyosaur's nucleus. Byung's jaw practically hits the floor in shock, clearly not expecting Dokja to just casually dig up something so valuable. Dokja wastes no time grabbing the nucleus, already thinking about profits. He tells Byung to put it up for sale in the Dokkaebi auction house, but with one specific condition: he will only accept broken faith as payment. Before Dokja can focus on business, Byung shifts gears and cheerfully informs the constellations that they will be back after a short commercial break. Dokja barely hides his irritation, knowing full well that this entire thing is basically reality TV for cosmic entities who have nothing better to do. Before Dokja even realizes it, a fully written contract appears in front of him. Byung, having just witnessed Dokja clear the hidden scenario, seems to have finally made up his mind. Dokja scans the contract, expecting the usual nonsense, but to his surprise, the deal is actually better than he anticipated. However, there is one major issue: it's missing a crucial clause. Byung, thinking he understands the problem, assumes Dokja is talking about a seal. He tries to brush it off, explaining that since a stream contract is soul-bound, a verbal agreement should be enough. Dokja, looking at him like he just heard the dumbest thing imaginable, clarifies that he's talking about something much more important, the ratio. Caught red-handed, Byung lets out an awkward chuckle, probably realizing he can't wiggle his way out of this. He quickly offers a 50-50th split, trying to make it sound generous. To sweeten the deal, he even promises not to charge Dokja for using the channel. But Dokja, being far too smart to fall for such a weak attempt, shuts him down immediately. Byung, clearly not ready to give up, argues that a 50-50th split is the industry standard. Surely Dokja wouldn't expect anything better, right? Unfortunately for him, Dokja is fully aware of how this business works. He points out the obvious: he doesn't have any constellations backing him up, which means when constellations send him coins, a hefty portion gets deducted as a tax by the Dokkaebi system. This is a massive inconvenience, but Dokja isn't the one suffering from it. No, the one really taking the hit is Byung, who has been making an absolute fortune thanks to Dokja's actions. Hearing this, Byung flinches, proving that Dokja hit the nail right on the head. At this point, Dokja doesn't even bother pretending to negotiate. With complete confidence, he declares that he will be keeping every single coin for himself. Byung stares at him, frozen in shock. The two lock eyes, tension thick in the air. On one side, Byung looks like he is about to explode from sheer frustration. On the other, Dokja simply smiles, completely unfazed. Without budging an inch, he states that Byung should be happy with just the commission. The message is clear: Dokja has no plans to hand over even a single coin. Byung immediately rejects Dokja's proposal, calling it ridiculous. Clearly, he still believes he has some bargaining power left. He tries to compromise, offering 70% instead of 100%, but Dokja isn't interested. Realizing that he's dealing with someone completely unreasonable, Byung throws out a weak threat: either Dokja agrees to his terms, or he finds another channel. He even name-drops Gildal, hoping to intimidate him with the idea of partnering with another Dokkaebi. Dokja, completely unfazed, reminds Byung that the advertisements will end soon. Once they do, the Constellations will come back expecting entertainment. And right now, the only thing they are watching is Dokja looking dissatisfied, which probably isn't a good look for a broadcast. Under increasing pressure, Byung finally caves and accepts Dokja's terms, though he looks like he just swallowed a lemon. Just when he thinks the nightmare is over, Dokja casually adds one last request. When Byung, already exhausted, asks what it is, Dokja simply smiles and drops another bomb. He wants a contract fee of 5,000 coins. Byung's reaction is priceless. His face twists in pure disbelief, as if he just witnessed the biggest scam in history, but there's nothing he can do. A contract is signed, sealing the deal. With business settled, Dokja finally steps out of the ichthyosaur's remains and emerges from the water. He takes a deep breath, feeling the refreshing air hit his lungs for the first time in 4 days. Every muscle in his body aches, but at least he is no longer inside a giant fish's stomach. Originally, he had planned to finish the scenario in just 2 days, but given the circumstances, completing it in 4 is still impressive, especially when considering that Jung Heewon in his 4th progression also took the same amount of time. That alone makes Dokja feel slightly accomplished. On top of that, he is satisfied with securing a streaming contract with Byung. The extra coins will come in handy, and he still finds amusement in how Byung's face scrunched up the moment he asked for 5,000 coins. That reaction alone was worth it. As he stands there, he reflects on how ironic the situation is. In his past life, he never got anyone to sign anything. But now, thanks to all the knowledge he gained from reading Teaser, he has turned into someone who can pull off deals like this without breaking a sweat. Dokja glances down at himself and immediately decides he needs new clothes. After everything he just went through, his current outfit is practically falling apart. Just as he makes this mental note, a system notification pops up, reminding him that his 4th wall skill is still active. A few minutes earlier, he had pointed out a system error to Byung, explaining that he couldn't access his attribute window. Byung, being the doubtful and nosy creature that he is, tried to interfere, thinking it was just some minor issue. The moment he attempted to mess with it, he got zapped by Dokja's skill, effectively blocking his access. Back in the present, Dokja smirks, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He didn't expect his skill to be strong enough to keep even a Dokkaebi from meddling. That's a win in his book. However, his moment of smugness disappears the second he steps into the area of the second main scenario. Almost immediately, he is hit with a poisonous fog. A system notification warns him that the scenario area is highly dangerous and advises him to hold his breath and go underground as fast as possible. Watching all of this unfold, the abyssal black flame dragon seems to be enjoying the show, its wicked smile practically radiating satisfaction. Dokja, realizing that things are about to get much worse, mentally braces himself for the upcoming challenges. The empty streets are now covered in a thick, deadly mist. Then, out of nowhere, a deafening roar echoes through the area. Not far from him, a giant rhinoceros and an equally massive praying mantis are locked in a fierce battle, tearing through whatever stands in their way. Because apparently the poisonous gas wasn't enough, now he also has to worry about oversized murder bugs. Meanwhile, Dokja manages to find a convenience store and takes the opportunity to grab some clothes. After changing into something less torn up, he starts gathering food supplies, preparing for what's ahead in this second main scenario. Once he has everything he needs, he knows it's time to move. The effects of the item he used to breathe in the poisonous air are starting to wear off, which means staying above ground any longer is not an option. Dokja relies on an item called Elaine Monkey's lungs to survive the poisonous air. By taking a bite, it clears out toxins from his system, giving him about 20 minutes before he needs another. It's not exactly the most convenient method, but it keeps him alive. As he moves, a faint voice calling for help catches his attention. He pauses, debating whether he should get involved. Deciding it's worth checking out, he follows the sound and soon spots a woman crawling on the ground. The sight stuns him. He hadn't expected anyone else to have survived in this deadly atmosphere. Without wasting time, he picks her up and carries her on his back. The purifying effect from his item is running out, so he has to find shelter fast. As he runs, he quickly considers his options. Dokja Station is completely destroyed since it's above ground, meaning it's no longer safe. The next closest underground station is Gumo Station, so he makes a beeline for it. When he arrives, he finds the entrance blocked. Not the best sight when time is running out. Thinking quickly, he wonders if the other side of the station might still be open. Before he can act, the woman on his back speaks up, mentioning that Exit 4 is a safe zone. At Exit 4, a group of people are about to shut the entrance. Dokja, seeing his one chance slipping away, jams a thorn into the gap to stop them from closing it. The people inside freeze, startled by the sudden interruption, and take a few cautious steps back. Their reactions make it clear they don't trust him. With no patience for their hesitation, he firmly tells them to open the door. Instead of cooperating, they start stuttering and tell him to leave. When he explains that the woman on his back is injured and needs help, they still refuse to let them in. Dokja frowns, trying to recall if anything like this happened in the novel. He doesn't remember this particular development, which only makes things more frustrating. Seeing no other choice, he grips the thorn, preparing to force his way in. If they won't open the door willingly, he'll make sure they don't get a choice. Dokja forces the roll-up door open, causing a loud, jarring noise that makes the entire entrance rattle. The people inside scream in panic, clearly not built for any sort of crisis. As soon as he steps into the safe zone, they scatter like cockroaches, running for their lives as if he's some kind of monster. Watching them flee, Dokja isn't impressed. If anything, he's just mildly annoyed at their over-the-top reaction. He carefully sets the woman down against the wall before handing her the Elaine Monkey's lungs item. He instructs her to put it in her mouth, explaining that while it won't heal her completely, it will neutralize the poison in her system. For a moment, he observes her closely, wondering if she's someone important from the novel. The thought lingers in his mind, if this were the original book, there's a good chance she wouldn't have made it this far. He considers checking her character profile, curious to see if she holds any significance, but before he can, the cowards who had run off earlier return, and this time they've brought someone new. The new arrival, radiating pure arrogance, demands to know who Dokja is. Dokja, unfazed by the theatrics, gives his name in the calmest way possible. The man immediately gets angrier, making it clear that he wasn't just asking for a name. He wanted to know what kind of person Dokja is. Typical tough guy behavior, trying to act important in a world that's already falling apart. As their exchange continues, one of the survivors suddenly notices the injured woman, causing the new guy to react. He recognizes her as someone from the so-called outcast group. The man then turns to his companion and questions why she didn't return with the rest of them. His companion, clearly uncomfortable, struggles to give a straight answer. It doesn't take long for the man to put two and two together. His companion had tried to take advantage of her and then left her for dead. Instead of showing any real remorse, the guilty survivor just chuckles awkwardly and gives a half-baked apology to a guy named Chalsu for acting selfishly. Dokja watches this unfold and tries to recall if there was ever a Chalsu in the novel. Nothing comes to mind, which means the god probably isn't important. If he were, Dokja would have remembered. Honestly, none of this surprises him. With the world in chaos, people immediately default to the most predictable and disgusting behaviors. Crimes like this happen so often in apocalypse stories that they feel like cliches at this point. One of the survivors steps forward and demands that Dokja hand over the woman. Before things escalate further, however, their attention shifts to something far more interesting: the food supplies Dokja had gathered. Their eyes lock onto it like starving animals, completely forgetting their original intentions. Chalsu, fully embracing his role as a third-rate villain, demands that Dokja leave the food behind and get lost if he values his life. Dokja takes a moment to reflect on how people in reality somehow manage to fit into the most predictable cliches. This situation is no different. Self-proclaimed thugs trying to establish dominance in a world that's already gone to chaos. The way things are going, you can already tell this isn't going to end peacefully. Before he can act, a system notification pops up. The Constellations, watching like an angry audience witnessing a rigged game, are furious. Seeing injustice unfold in front of them must have hit a nerve, and their collective outrage triggers an unexpected event. At their request, a bounty hunter scenario activates. The timing couldn't be better. Dokja grips his thorn and stands up, sizing up the situation. What could have been a headache is now an opportunity. He might be outnumbered, but he isn't the one who should be worried. Cholsu, completely unaware of the disaster about to hit him, cracks his brass knuckles together and throws out another weak threat. He makes it clear that if Dokja doesn't leave, he will make sure he never walks again. Dokja, unimpressed, just takes this as further confirmation that this guy talks way more than he can fight. A quick glance at the new F-rated sub-scenario. Eliminate the grunts reveals the conditions. Take out these low-level thugs in 5 minutes. The system keeps the reward and failure penalties hidden, but it doesn't really matter. Dokjan's already made up his mind. He carefully sets the injured woman against the wall, then without hesitation, delivers a brutal right hook to Cholsu's face. The impact is immediate. For all this tough talk, Cholsu crumples like a paper bag, his body sent flying straight into a wall. So much for being intimidating. The rest of the thugs freeze. Their so-called leader just got launched across the room like a cheap action figure, and now they don't know what to do. Still, not wanting to lose face, they cautiously surround Dokja, trying to figure out if they even stand a chance. Unfortunately for them, they don't. The difference in stats is too massive to ignore. Dokja is sitting comfortably at level 33, while these guys are still struggling in single-digit territory. It's not even a fair fight. Instead of wasting energy, Dokja goes for the most effective strategy, targeting their legs. One by one, the thugs drop like dominoes, unable to react fast enough. They might have thought they were the predators here, but in reality, they were nothing more than background characters in someone else's story. Cholsu, barely holding himself together, watches warily as Dokja approaches. His face is swollen from the earlier hit, making him look even more pathetic. Dokja quickly pulls up his character profile, expecting nothing special. But what he sees actually catches him off guard, monarch of the small fries. Of all the possible choices, Cholsu picked the one that literally announces him as the king of weaklings. Dokja almost feels bad. Almost. To confirm his suspicion, he casually asks if Cholsu is connected to the Choldo group. Cholsu, still shaken, reacts with genuine surprise, not expecting to be recognized. Dokja remembers him now. This guy was supposed to be the absolute worst person in Gumo Station, a walking disaster in the novel. More importantly, he was supposed to be dead. According to the story, Jung Heewon should have wiped him out already, so the fact that he's still breathing is confusing. Cholsu, sensing the shift in mood, tries to act tough again. He hints that he has killed before, attempting to put himself on the same level as Dokja. Hearing this, Dokja feels nothing but irritation. He recalls his own past decisions, but time he threw the bugs the moment he chose to let Namwoon die. The thought of being a murderer crosses his mind, but he quickly pushes it aside. Thanks to his fourth wall skill, Dokja easily sees through Cholsu's bluff. The guy is trying to manipulate the situation, but it's a pathetic attempt. Without hesitation, Dokja drives his thorn straight into Cholsu's wrist, cutting off whatever nonsense he was about to say next. Cholsu lets out a scream, but Dokja isn't in the mood for his theatrics. He reminds him of one simple fact: he is in no position to talk. If Cholsu wants to play the tough guy, then he better act like one. Dokja also remembers something important. Cholsu supporting Constellation is a masochist, the kind that gets enjoyment out of watching their avatar get beaten down. Dokja, knowing exactly how to use this to his advantage, doesn't hold back. He lands a brutal kick, followed by a few punches, making sure the Constellation gets its money's worth. Cholsu's so-called friends stand frozen, too scared to intervene. Eventually, one of them, barely able to watch, begs him to stop. Dokja turns, glancing at the unconscious woman nearby. The sight makes him reflect for a moment. Humans are weak. Physically, mentally, so fragile in every way. And yet even the weakest of them are capable of the worst kinds of violence. Is it the chaos of the world that brings it out, or is it something buried deep inside them from the start? Still, he needs answers. He glares at Cholsu and demands to know why he did it. The thug, beaten and exhausted, just stares back silently before spitting out a curse and telling Dokja to end it already. That response surprises Dokja. Cholsu isn't just acting on instinct. This isn't mindless survival. There's something else going on here. Dokja looks at Cholsu's bloody face and notices something unexpected: sorrow. It was there long before the world turned upside down, just like it had been for him. The scenario countdown ticks down, only 10 seconds left. Dokja stands and considers the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Cholsu wasn't completely wrong. Then, acting on instinct rather than logic, he delivers one last kick. A loud crack echoes through the air. A system notification immediately appears announcing that all conditions for clearing the scenario have been met. The reward is 300 coins. Not the biggest payout, but enough to prove that this world only recognizes results, not morality. As he observes the ruined world around him, he acknowledges a harsh truth. This isn't just survival anymore. If he wants to keep going, he needs to adapt, whether he likes it or not. One of the bystanders, still shaken by the scene, mutters something about how cold-blooded Dokja is. It doesn't bother him. He has bigger concerns. With the woman still unconscious, he lifts her onto his back and instructs the remaining people to lead the way to their group. When they arrive at Gumo Station, people are visibly shocked. A group coming down the stairs, half of them injured, isn't something they see every day. Before Dokja can take in the scene, a familiar voice calls his name. Looking up, he sees his friends from the subway. From the distance, Sanga's voice stands out, but before she can reach him, Jiliong is already sprinting forward. Without hesitation, the kid throws his arms around Dokja. Sanga and Hyunsung follow, relief written all over their faces. Hyunsung, guilt still lingering in his voice, apologizes for leaving Dokja behind. But Dokja doesn't blame him. Hyunsung didn't have a choice. The soldier then explains that Joonghyuk had been right. He had told them that Dokja was probably still alive. Curious, Dokja asks about Junghyuk's whereabouts. Turns out the regressor left the station yesterday. Only then does Dokja fully understand why Chuldo group members are still alive. Junghyuk left before dealing with them. As he and Sanga watch the station's people helping each other, another realization hits him. Junghyuk has become a force that controls everything, a monster in his own way. Unlike the others, Junghyuk moves forward, always focused on his own goal. Dokja, on the other hand, is the one stuck cleaning up the mess he leaves behind. Without meaning to, he speaks his thoughts out loud. His friends hear him, but before they can react, he dismisses it as nothing, just a habit of his. The secretive plotter, amused by his words, watches in approval. Wanting to change the subject, Dokja asks about Manga, but before anyone can answer, a commotion breaks out. A group of men suddenly barges in. Dokja immediately senses something is off. Then he spots Manga, the same man who abandoned him on the bridge. And now here he is, standing in front of everyone, pointing straight at Dokja and shouting accusations. With wild energy, he declares that Dokja is pure evil and must be thrown out. The same guy who ran like a coward just days ago is now standing tall, trying to turn the crowd against him. Dokja sighs. Some people really don't know when to quit. Before Manga can keep running his mouth, a hand lands on his shoulder, stopping him mid-rant. A slim man steps forward from the crowd, his presence immediately drawing attention. Introducing himself as Inho Chien, he speaks with the kind of confidence that suggests he thinks he's the smartest man in the room. Dokja hears the name and instantly recognizes it, but frustratingly, he can't recall exactly where from. He introduces himself as Kim Dokja, keeping his expression unreadable. One glance at Inho's eyes is all it takes to confirm something important. This guy has a sponsor. Instinctively, Dokja grips his thorn, preparing for the inevitable. With the way things have been going, he fully expects to be ganged up on for beating half of them into the ground earlier. But instead of hostility, something unexpected happens. They start applauding him. It takes a second for it to sink in. These people, instead of demanding revenge, are actually grateful. Apparently, beating up the resident thugs has earned him some appreciation. Inho, ever the opportunist, gathers everyone and announces that Dokja has brought food. That's all it takes. Suddenly, the tension shifts and people begin grinning at him, their attitudes flipping the moment they hear about supplies. As Dokja officially gets welcomed to Gumo Station, Inho flashes a smile. It's polite on the surface, but his clenched fist says otherwise. Dokja doesn't need to hear a single word more. He already knows how this man's future is going to end. A little later, Hyunsung pulls him aside and gives a status update. Currently, 86 people are living in the station, a number much lower than Dokja expected. Hyunsung explains that most of them came from the train cabin and nearby stations. Hearing this, Dokja comes to a grim realization: every single person inside is a murderer. Hyunsung, looking exhausted, admits something even worse. The station isn't just a chaotic group of survivors, it's divided into two factions. The major group consists of Manga and those who support his twisted ideas. These are the ones with influence controlling how things operate. Meanwhile, the minor group is made up of those who have no real power. They don't follow Manga by choice, they do it for protection. Dokja doesn't say anything, but it's clear what this means. The real danger here isn't the apocalypse. It's the people who are trying to build their own little kingdoms inside it. On the other side of the station, Manga and Inho stand before the gathered crowd, talking like self-appointed leaders. But while Manga is focused on his usual nonsense, Inho's gaze keeps shifting toward Dokja. The attention isn't exactly surprising. People like Inho always take an interest in anything they can control. Meanwhile, Hyunsung explains the station's situation. Supplies are running dangerously low, forcing people to scavenge for food outside. Among those sent out is Hyuwon, the woman Dokja had saved earlier. Dokja takes note of something important. Hyunsung didn't join the major group. Despite his strength, he chose to stay with a weaker faction. It isn't just a simple choice, though. Hyunsung clearly feels uneasy about the way things are being run. Deciding that the miners are where he belongs, he distances himself from the people in power. However, he still struggles with his own doubts. Hyunsung criticizes himself, calling himself a hypocrite for worrying about right and wrong in a world that has already fallen apart. He starts rambling, but Dokja quickly shuts him down. Without hesitation, he taps Hyunsung's right chest and tells him that it's better to worry about right and wrong, even if it makes him a hypocrite. The words catch Hyunsung off guard. For a moment, he just stands there, visibly moved. Before he can respond, Inho steps in, cutting the conversation short. He asks to have a word with Dokja, leaving little room for argument. Later, Inho makes his pitch. He wants Dokja to join his group. Hyunsung, standing behind him, barely tries to hide his boredom, letting out a loud yawn. Inho, pretending not to notice, offers a high-ranking position. He paints a picture of leadership, promising that they could lead the group together. Dokja, already expecting some kind of manipulation, wonders what would happen if he refused. As if reading his thoughts, Inho laughs, brushing off the idea as if he hadn't even considered it. Then, with the fake sincerity of a practiced politician, Inho speaks about obligation, claiming that someone with Dokja's power should feel responsible for leading others. Dokja, seeing straight through the act, doesn't bother responding. He lets the silence stretch, watching as Inho continues. Realizing that charm alone won't work, Inho shifts tactics, trying to appeal to something else. He gestures toward the struggling survivors, pointing out how they are suffering without enough food. He asks Dokja to think about them, as if that will somehow convince him. Dokja doesn't react. Instead, he lifts his gaze and focuses on something else entirely, the glowing exit sign above. A moment later, Hyunsung asked Dokja if he had to refuse like that, so Dokja asked him back whether or not he wanted Dokja to join the majors. Hyunsung clearly refused that. He kept thinking about how Inho had asked Dokja to find him again if he changed his mind. Dokja just nonchalantly ignores it while offering his friends food for dinner. Before Dokja can properly react, someone calls out to him, and almost immediately, a crowd starts forming. More and more people gather, their numbers growing alongside their hostility. Then the accusations start flying. The crowd claims that Dokja hoarded all the food they worked hard to gather. Their voices rise as they demand that Inho take charge of the supplies, insisting that only he can distribute food fairly. Dokja stands there, genuinely shocked. The sheer distance between reality and the nonsense they are shouting is almost impressive. These people weren't there when he fought to stay alive, yet they speak as if they personally suffered because of him. Just as he listens to the misplaced outrage, a realization hits him. The most dangerous kind of person in a post-apocalyptic world isn't someone like Cholsu. Cholsu was predictable, violent, reckless, and easy to deal with. But someone like Inho, that's a different story. Through the gaps in the crowd, Dokja spots Inho watching from a distance, and finally, the missing pieces click into place. Now he remembers. Inho from Gumo Station. The man who built his power not through strength, but through manipulation. Unlike common thugs, Inho doesn't need to fight. He waits for people to become desperate, then turns their suffering into leverage. He whispers just the right words, nudges just the right emotions, and before anyone realizes it, he's the one in control. Right now, Inho has backed Dokja into a corner. Either Dokja hands over the food and becomes the hero, officially handing power over to Inho's system, or he keeps it and becomes the villain, turning the entire station against him. It's a masterful setup. A trap where both outcomes benefit Inho and screw Dokja over. Dokja grips his bag of food tightly, anger burning just beneath the surface. The injustice of it all is infuriating, not just the lies, but how easily people eat them up without question. Before he can make a move, a new system notification appears. The second scenario area has officially begun. The system instructs him to locate the trigger point and move forward. A well-timed distraction. But it doesn't change the fact that this fight isn't over. Meanwhile, Inho stands at a distance, watching the chaos unfold. The entire station is now yelling at Dokja, demanding that he surrender his food. For Inho, this is almost too easy. The people are doing exactly what he wants, following his lead without even realizing it. As the tension builds, he confidently steps forward, already convinced of the outcome. Then, with full authority, he announces that Dokja will give him the food because, in the end, Dokja has no other choice. Or at least, that's what he thinks. Dokja agrees to hand over the food, and for a brief moment, Inho feels victorious. But his satisfaction is short-lived. Dokja doesn't intend to give anything for free. Instead, he declares that he will sell the food for coins. The crowd falls silent, confused by the unexpected condition. Inho's expression shifts slightly, his moment of triumph already slipping away. Dokja keeps his tone casual but makes his point clear he doesn't trust Inho to distribute the food fairly, and if people truly need it, they can buy it like any other transaction. Murmurs spread through the station. This isn't how things were supposed to go. They expected submission, not negotiation. Meanwhile, Dokja turns to his group and informs them that they aren't getting freebies either, they'll have to pay just like everyone else. Then something unexpected happens. The woman Dokja saved earlier steps forward. With calm confidence, she states that Dokja is absolutely right. She is not a charity case. For the first time, her name is spoken, Heewon. She introduces herself properly, but more importantly, she openly thanks Dokja for saving her life. Turning to Sangha and Hyunsung, she tells them to consider what Dokja went through to get the food. This wasn't handed to him, he fought for it. Her words sink in. Sangha and Hyunsung exchange glances, then nod in understanding. They don't hesitate. They agree to pay. Sangha steps up first, trading her coins for food, setting the example. Jillian follows shortly after, making his own payment. Then, in a small but endearing moment, Jillian hands over extra coins, a payment for the chocolate he ate earlier. Heewon watches this with approval, clearly proud of the kid for understanding fairness. Then, Heewon drops a bombshell. She reveals what the major group has been doing. They've been manipulating the food supply, sending people outside on false scavenging missions only for those same people to never return. Just as this revelation spreads, the mood shifts again. Now, instead of arguing about the prices of Dokja, people start whispering about the true cost of trusting Inho's group. Some begin to wonder maybe Dokja isn't the problem. Maybe the price of his food isn't too high. Maybe they've been paying a far worse price all along. Dokja remains confident that sooner or later, desperation will force people to buy from him. Survival makes even the proudest people lower their heads when hunger kicks in. By nighttime, most of the station is asleep, but Dokja stays awake even when Hyunsung tells him to get some rest. Before they can continue the conversation, a group interrupts them, and just like that, the night vanishes into morning. By the time Heewon sees Dokja again, she immediately notices something shocking. His bag is completely empty. It doesn't take long to figure out why. The smaller group eventually gives in and buys the food. That part is expected. The real surprise comes when the larger group does the same. Then Inho decides to make a grand announcement, clearly enjoying himself. He acts like he's in full control, wearing the smug expression of someone who thinks he is the smartest person in the room. With fake authority, he declares that food rations will now be limited to 3 biscuits per person per day. Dokja and his party stay silent, watching as frustration spreads through the crowd. People start complaining, their voices growing louder. And just when things seem bad, Inho finds a way to make them worse. Instead of calming the people down, he tells them that if they want more food, they should just go outside and get it themselves. Instantly, the mood shifts from frustration to outright fury. The station is now on the verge of chaos. Then Inho turns to Dokja and drops his final bomb. With a smug grin, he claims this decision is all because of Dokja. He reveals that the larger group want half the food, but instead of sharing it with everyone, he will only give more to those with valuable skills. And as he speaks, something strange radiates from him, like he is using a skill. Dokja immediately understands what is happening. Inho has activated Insight, a dangerous ability that manipulates emotions. Suddenly, everything clicks. Inho never cared about buying food. His real goal was to turn the entire station against Dokja. Heewon, standing beside Dokja, quickly evaluates the situation. She sees the flaw in Dokja's plan, selling food to weaken the larger group, but if they also bought from him, then the balance of power hasn't changed much. Dokja remains completely unbothered. He simply points out that he earned even more coins because of it. Heewon stares at him, now seriously wondering if even his own party trusts him at this point. But when she realizes he sold everything, her patience finally reaches its limit. Annoyance flashes across her face, and she does not bother hiding it anymore. Before the tension can escalate further, Jillian quietly steps forward and offers some of his own food to Dokja. He is willing to share whatever little he has left. Dokja refuses instantly. Instead, he gives his party a strange order. They must eat all of their food right now. He offers no explanation. The rest of the station falls into desperation. The major group now controls the food, and they are charging ridiculous prices for it. Anyone without coins is left with nothing. The real fight for power has just begun. Dokja stands alone at the rails leading toward Yaksu Station, already planning his next move. Deep in thought, he barely notices when Heewon approaches. She warns him that people who go down that path never return. Her words mean little to him. Without hesitation, he climbs on the platform. Before he can focus, Heewon unexpectedly thanks him for saving her life the previous day. She keeps it brief, then gestures toward a man nearby, the same one who tried to attack her. Her expression stays calm, but her meaning is clear. That man belongs to her, and no one should interfere. Curious, Dokja checks her character profile. So far, she has no constellations, but before he can analyze further, her sharp breath catches his attention. The major group has just thrown a group of elderly people and a woman outside, fully aware they won't survive. The sight makes her furious. Before she can do something reckless, Dokja stops her. He knows that fighting back now won't change anything. Even if she kills a few of them, the real problem remains. Without food, they will all starve anyway. Taking another look at her profile, he notices something interesting. Her attribute is Crouching Figure. It's rare, but more importantly, it has one of the strongest effects on an avatar. Heewon struggles to hold back, unable to accept just watching innocent people being sent to their deaths. But Dokja stays firm. He explains that fighting now is pointless. The food crisis is the real war, and unless they fix that, nothing will change. At this moment, he seriously considers bringing her into his group. Her profile is too valuable to ignore. Focusing back on the situation, he offers her a deal. He will take care of the food issue. All she needs to do is wait. He is certain that Baeyong will show up soon. And then right on cue, a bright light cuts through the darkness of the station. Everyone immediately recognizes the presence of a Dokkaebi. But the moment Dokja gets a clear look, he realizes something is wrong. This isn't Baeyong. The explanation is obvious. Baeyong must be getting punished for breaking some rule. The new Dokkaebi is different. Its fur is pitch black, its robes shimmer with gold, and unlike Baeyong, it doesn't waste time. Scanning the crowd, it casually points out how unusually calm this station has been. Then, with a simple snap of its fingers, everything changes. Suddenly, every single piece of food in stock lifts into the air, floating above the stunned crowd as if gravity no longer exists. A heavy sense of dread fills the air as everyone watches, unable to do anything. Then, with another snap of the Dokkaebi's fingers, the real nightmare begins. In an instant, the food vanishes. The station erupts into chaos. Panic spreads as people scramble around, desperately trying to understand what just happened. Before anyone can catch their breath, a new system notification appears announcing a new scenario, survival fee. From now on, everyone has to pay 100 coins per day just to stay alive or face consequences. Just like that, survival becomes even harder. Once the Dokkaebi disappears, Inho jumps into action. He quickly gathers everyone and announces a new rule. Only those who join the search team will be given food. His frustration is clear. He didn't expect the food to vanish and is now struggling to deal with a mess. When he looks at Dokja's calm expression, doubt creeps into his mind. Did Dokja know this would happen? Dokja watches Inho get more and more uneasy, calm as ever. He wonders if Inho will start suspecting him, but it doesn't matter. If Inho can't prove anything, there's nothing to worry about. Turning to Heewon, Dokja casually explains that he had been thinking about what the Dokkaebi might do next to make things worse. That's all. But inside, Dokja knows this situation is much bigger than he first thought. And as he scans the notification bar, something strange catches his eye. He doesn't remember ever seeing the survival fee scenario in the original story. For the first time, he starts to wonder if the contract he signed with Baeyong has somehow changed the course of events. Before he can think too deeply about it, Hyunsung calls out to him. He suggests they join the search team, but Dokja immediately shuts it down. They need to find a new food source, not run around chasing after what's already gone. Dokja's gaze shifts toward the railway, and in that moment, everyone instantly understands his plan. He turns back to his party and simply tells them they're going monster hunting. A few minutes later, Dokja and his group step onto the railway, following the faint traces left by monsters. As they move forward, Dokja is surprised to see that Inho doesn't try to stop them. This realization brings a new understanding. Every time he earns someone's trust, impresses them, or figures out their thoughts, his understanding level increases. But Inho isn't the type to just sit back and do nothing. Instead of interfering directly, he sends someone to spy on them. As they continue down the railway, a familiar face joins the group, Myongo. Of course, it had to be him. And true to form, Myongo is already proving himself to be completely useless. The moment he sees the bodies scattered along the tracks, his face goes pale. Fear grips him, and he barely manages to keep himself together. Meanwhile, the rest of the group stares at him in disbelief. Not even 10 minutes into the journey, and he's already freaking out. Dokja quickly realizes that Myongo isn't a real threat, just a walking distraction at best. At the same time, Hyunsung watches Heewon with a worried expression on his face. Even though Dokja stopped her earlier, it's clear that she hasn't let go of her anger. As the group moves forward, Dokja suggests sending the woman and child back, explaining that the road ahead is too dangerous. Heewon immediately disagrees, refusing to accept that excuse. She doesn't buy the whole too dangerous line for a second. Dokja, already tired of the unnecessary banter, shuts them down with the simple truth. Anyone can be strong if they increase their stats. To prove his point, he calls on Gilliong. Without hesitation, Gilliong touches the ground, and from his fingertip, a thin strand of light emerges. At the end of the strand, a cockroach appears and delivers a message: they are safe for another 100 steps. The realization hits the group. Gilliong has the ability to communicate with bugs. With quiet confidence, he tells everyone not to worry about him, making it clear that he isn't just a kid. The group presses on, but soon, Sangha stops in front of a massive wall blocking their path. When she reaches out and touches it, the system immediately reacts. A new sub-scenario appears. On the other side of the wall, dozens of monster corpses lie scattered across the ground. Dokja instantly recognizes them ground rats. Only one person could have done this: Junghyuk. However, despite the rats already being dead, the system demands that the group hunt them, meaning the scenario is still active. Realizing that they will have to fight, Dokja turns to Heewon and asks if she has good combat skills. A few minutes later, Dokja gets to work. Using the bones of the ground rats, he crafts makeshift swords for the group. The effort catches the attention of several constellations, earning their approval. Once the weapons are ready, he offers one last piece of advice: they should invest their coins in strength, because in his mind, not everyone will survive this scenario. Before anyone can dwell on his words, a rattling noise echoes from the darkness. The group tenses up, instinctively preparing for an attack. Then, a pack of ground rats emerges. Hyunsung reacts first, stepping forward and drawing his sword. Without hesitation, he plunges the blade into one of the creature's stomachs, but more rats immediately charge toward Heewon. She, however, proves more than capable. With one powerful swing, she cuts through multiple rats, dropping them instantly. But her attack isn't perfect. One rat barely survives and scurries away, attempting to escape. Before it can get far, Gilliong is already waiting for it. Without hesitation, he swings his weapon, smashing the rat's head in. The kid doesn't even flinch. Sangha moves swiftly, stabbing the rat in the back of the neck and ending its struggle instantly. Meanwhile, Dokja continues fighting calmly, his movements efficient and calculated. He lands a precise strike, slicing a rat clean in half. He takes a moment to observe his party and is genuinely surprised by how well they are handling themselves. By the time the fight is over, Dokja has taken down 4 rats. Heewon manages to kill 2, while Hyunsung finishes off 3. For a moment, Dokja feels a familiar frustration creeping in. Hyunsung's strength is leagues ahead of his, and it's starting to get on his nerves. If he wants to keep up, he'll have to start investing more into his own stats. Then, as if to make things worse, he remembers that Hyunsung has a starter pack, a convenient boost that not only increases his stats, but also grants weapon skills. Dokja tries not to think about how unfair that is. Meanwhile, Sangha voices the question no one wants to ask: how exactly are they supposed to eat these rats? Dokja, completely unfazed, assures her that they'll figure it out. This answer earns him nothing but glares from his party. For a second, he wonders if his response was too casual. Before he can think much about it, Hyunsung suddenly asks if he knows the future. Dokja pauses. That's a dangerous question. He can't just give an honest answer, but before he can decide what to say, a loud scream interrupts the conversation. Manga. For once, Dokja is actually relieved by his existence. All attention shifts to Manga, who is currently being dragged away by a rat. Sangha rushes forward, grabbing hold of him, trying to pull him back. Then things go from bad to worse. Instead of saving Manga, Sangha ends up getting dragged along with him. Before anyone can react, both of them disappear into the underground. Hyunsung immediately tries to chase after them, but he's too late. For a moment, Hyunsung and Heewon stand in front of the gaping hole in the railway, trying to process what just happened. Worry creeps into their expressions. However, Dokja already has a plan. He takes Gilliong with him and jumps down after them. His decision isn't random. Gilliong's skill makes him the perfect guide in a situation like this. Before leaving, he quickly tells Hyunsung to keep an eye on Heewon. Hyunsung, still tense from the situation, turns to Heewon and notices something important. Her neck is still bruised from earlier injuries. She has been pushing herself without rest, and now that he looks closely, he realizes that Dokja was right. She needs to be watched. Meanwhile, Dokja and Gilliong move through the dark tunnel. With Gilliong leading the way, they navigate the pitch-black surroundings. The darkness is so thick that it's impossible to tell where they are going. But one thing is clear: they are heading straight into the unknown. As they move through the tunnel, Gilliong suddenly speaks up. Without hesitation, he asks if Dokja intentionally let Sangha and Manga get dragged away. He isn't just guessing. He saw Dokja watching the entire thing unfold without doing anything. Dokja doesn't deny it, and almost instantly, a few constellations express their displeasure. He doesn't need to explain himself. Jiliang is too sharp to be lied to anyway. Instead, Dokja calmly states a fact: ground rats tend to hoard whatever they catch. They store food, rare items, and other valuables in their lairs. Jiliang immediately puts the pieces together. Dokja wants something inside the rat's nest. But even though that part is true, Jiliang knows it isn't Dokja's real reason. After all, Dokja had already saved him once before back on the train. Jiliang trusts Dokja, but at the same time he doesn't fully understand why. Meanwhile, Dokja knows exactly what kind of world he's in now, a world where people will try to take advantage of him at every turn. Just as they near their destination, Jiliang suddenly stops. Then, with complete seriousness, he asks if Dokja is a god or the protagonist of this world. Dokja immediately denies it. He is neither. He simply knows things. But then, Jiliang asks another question: is there a reward at the end of all the scenarios? For the first time, Dokja doesn't answer right away. Jiliang starts trembling, sensing the weight of Dokja's silence. At the same time, Dokja's thoughts drift elsewhere. He remembers the people who lost their minds in this new world, people like Namwoon who became violent because of their suffering. Then he remembers others, the kind who prey on the weak, using the apocalypse as an excuse to justify their cruelty. But then there are people like Jiliang, people who still hold on to optimism even in a world that tries to crush them. And that's why Dokja ultimately agrees with him. As Dokja places a reassuring hand on Jiliang's shoulder, the field around them suddenly shifts. The surroundings change, revealing a grim, eerie place covered in massive roots. In the center of it all, a mysterious box glows with an ominous purple light. Then, without warning, the sub-scenario updates. A scratching sound echoes from inside the box, and Dokja, sensing danger, instantly covers Jiliang's mouth. Something else is here. A low growl rumbles from the distance, and suddenly, a blue light appears near the box. The ground rats freeze in fear, their instincts screaming at them to run. Then faint voices drift from the corner of the room: Manga and Sanga. They are both tied up with roots, and unsurprisingly, they are already arguing. As Dokja watches the mess unfold, he finally realizes why Manga wasn't driving his fancy car earlier. Turns out Manga had stolen Sanga's bike. His excuse: he wanted to drive her home. Dokja barely holds back a sigh. It makes so much sense now. And of course, Sanga isn't letting this slide. The two continue shouting at each other, their argument growing louder and more pointless by the second. Finally, Dokja has had enough. Without saying a word, he lifts his thorn and takes aim. For a brief moment, there is complete silence. Then, Dokja throws it. The thorn bolts through the air, cutting through the darkness like a spear. Manga, mid-rant, notices immediately, but it's too late. The spike doesn't hit him directly. Instead, it flies just past his head, embedding itself into the wall behind him. Instantly, the argument stops. Both Manga and Sanga freeze, realizing that Dokja and Jiliang have been standing there the whole time. Dokja expected something to happen, but even he didn't anticipate what came next. The wall where the spike landed starts cracking. Manga and Sanga snap out of their argument and immediately go on alert. Then something else happens. A swarm of bugs gets caught in the impact and dies instantly, but only Jiliang notices this. Meanwhile, Dokja is too focused on something far more important. The rats are trembling. Their fear is so intense that they seem frozen in place, and then he senses it. The dark flames rising from the depths of the lair, and from the center of the massive, tangled roots, something appears. A tall figure emerges, its skull-like face hidden beneath a deep hood. But that's not the worst part. From beneath the robe, numerous tentacles slither and move unnaturally. The Keeper of the Dark has arrived. At that moment, Dokja finally notices the effect on Jiliang. The bugs had died instantly, and Jiliang must have felt it. His expression twists in discomfort, his breathing uneven. Without hesitation, Dokja tells him to rest. Then, without a single glance at the towering creature before him, Dokja calmly walks past the Keeper as if it isn't even there. Dokja moves quickly, cutting through the roots binding Sanga and Manga. However, he immediately notices a problem. His knife, which should have been sharp enough for this, is already blunt after just a few cuts. Of course, because nothing can ever be simple. Before he can dwell on it, the Keeper shifts its attention to him and his group. Without hesitation, Dokja tells them to stay back. He already understands what's happening here. The rats have been collecting items not for themselves, but as a sacrifice to a much stronger species. And now that stronger species is standing right in front of them. Dokja, however, has no intention of fighting it. Then the Keeper speaks. For a split second, Dokja is caught off guard. Then, without warning, the heavy aura of fear floods toward him, pressing down like an invisible weight. But just as it tries to take hold, his fourth wall skill immediately activates, completely blocking the effect. The fear slides right off him, leaving him completely unaffected. However, this only makes the Keeper angrier. The flames in the lair flare up, growing more intense, casting dancing shadows along the twisted roots. Meanwhile, Jiliang is still weak, barely able to stand. Even though Dokja doesn't want to fight, it's clear he has no choice anymore. Before he can react, Sangha suddenly says become a mother. Dokja, caught off guard, turns to her in confusion. Not only is she still standing near him, but she also seems to be paying close attention to the keeper's words. She's trying to understand it. It doesn't take long for Dokja to realize why. Sangha has an interpretation skill. With her ability, she pieces together the keeper's message and what it wants. It wants to be a mother. Before anyone can process this, the keeper slowly raises one of its many tentacles. Then it points straight at Myango. Dokja and Sangha barely have time to react before the tentacle surges forward at terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, it shoves itself straight into Myango's mouth. Dokja and Sangha stiffen in horror as Myango is forced to swallow something. It only takes a second for Dokja to realize what's happening. The keeper isn't just collecting sacrifices, it's trying to use other species to carry its offspring. Dokja doesn't even hesitate. He sprints forward and slashes through the tentacle in one clean strike. The keeper lets out a piercing scream, writhing in pain, but isn't done. Immediately, it retaliates, multiple tentacles lashing out at Dokja. He barely manages to block the attack, but Sangha watches from behind, her expression filled with worry. Because even though Dokja is holding his ground, this fight is far from over. Dokja keeps fighting, dodging and countering as best as he can. But there's a problem. His sword isn't built for this. After taking too many hits, the blade finally gives in, shattering mid-fight and leaving him completely unarmed. That, of course, is exactly when the keeper decides to slam a tentacle straight at him. Without a second to spare, Dokja jumps away, barely avoiding the impact. The tentacle crashes into the ground, leaving a deep indentation. At this point, Dokja knows one thing for sure: he isn't winning this fight with brute force. Instead, he calls out to the Dokkaebi. As he continues dodging the relentless attacks, the Dokkaebi finally appears, but instead of helping, it flat-out refuses. Unfortunately for the Dokkaebi, Dokja is not in the mood for nonsense. He reminds the creature that the Constellations are watching. More importantly, they are very interested in this fight. That's all it takes. Under pressure, Biryu the Dokkaebi has no choice but to comply. And as Dokja continues evading the keeper's attacks, Biryu opens the mail. Inside is the item Dokja had obtained from an auction house, the trade he made for the ichthyosaur's nucleus back in the belly of the beast. And just as Dokja planned, he hits exactly what he needs: a sword named Broken Faith. The moment he summons it, the blade materializes in his hand. Without wasting a second, Dokja swings it. But strangely, the keeper stops attacking. For the first time, it looks surprised. Meanwhile, Biryu lets out a laugh, completely unimpressed. After all, the sword is broken. Only a small piece of the blade remains, barely enough to be called a weapon. Biryu thinks it's hilarious, but Dokja already expected this. He doesn't even react to the mockery. Instead, he focuses his energy into the weapon. And then it starts to glow. Both Biryu and the keeper freeze as the sword suddenly radiates an intense light. Without hesitation, Dokja attacks. The moment the sword makes contact, a brilliant white light bursts from the impact, flooding the entire area. Biryu, who had been so quick to laugh earlier, is now speechless. What he doesn't know is that Dokja had bought a set of skills from Baeyeon back in the ichthyosaur's belly, and one of those skills is White Star Aura. This specific skill reacts to Broken Faith, amplifying its power, and as a result, the sword's energy increases dramatically, engulfing the entire blade in pure white light. The keeper, refusing to go down easily, prepares its next attack. But Dokja moves first. He swings his sword, slicing straight through the incoming tentacles. A piercing shriek fills the lair as severed tentacles drop to the ground. But as much as Dokja now has a powerful sword, there's still one tiny problem: he isn't a swordsman. And because of that, he loses too much mana too quickly. Realizing he can't keep up this pace, he activates his reading skill. The keeper doesn't give him a break. It lashes out with another attack, and Dokja barely dodges in time. He quickly flips through his bookmark skill, scanning for an option. The pages turn rapidly until he settles on bookmark number 2. Immediately, a green silhouette surrounds him as he activates one of Hyunsung's weapon skills. Now the real fight begins. Dokja's power surges as he charges toward the keeper, cutting through another tentacle with ease. Even with its wounds, the keeper refuses to give up, still thrashing and trying to fight back. But Dokja isn't alone. With Hyunsung's shadow boosting him, he moves faster, slicing through the tentacles on the other side. He grips the sword with both hands and leaps toward the keeper, already knowing that it always pauses briefly after each attack. Taking advantage of this, he moves in for the final strike. With one clean motion, he slices straight through the middle of the keeper, landing on the ground behind it as the creature lets out a deafening scream. His party watches in stunned silence. Sanga, still using her interpretation skill, relays what the Keeper is thinking, wants to know how Dokja knew its attack patterns. And as the Keeper collapses, Dokja casually states that it just needs more reading. The Constellations watch in fascination, clearly impressed by the fight's outcome. Meanwhile, Biryu is still processing what just happened. Another sword appearing this early in the scenario. That wasn't supposed to happen. Dokja, unfazed, points out that this isn't a real other sword, it's a one-time use item. Then, getting straight to business, he asks for his reward since the sub-scenario is now complete. A system notification confirms their victory, granting them 500 coins. However, Biryu then presents an interesting offer. Does Dokja want to finish the Keeper off? Dokja immediately refuses, but of course he lies about the reason. He claims he doesn't believe in unnecessary killing, which sounds noble enough, except everyone knows that's absolute nonsense. The real reason is killing the Keeper would draw the attention of the Demon King, and whoever does it is guaranteed to suffer. With that matter settled, Dokja turns his focus to something more important, the glowing box. Biryu, however, is standing in the way. Instead of wasting time arguing, Dokja simply kicks him aside and walks forward. But before he can claim the prize, something unexpected happens. A blade suddenly pierces the Keeper's body. Turning to look, Dokja sees the culprit, Myongo. Myongo stands there, smirking, completely full of himself as the Keeper takes its final breath. He laughs, loudly celebrating his so-called victory. Then, right in the middle of his hysterical gloating, a notification pops up. The system informs him that the Demon King has cursed him. At that moment, Myongo's smile vanishes. Dokja, watching this disaster unfold, simply shakes his head. This is exactly why he didn't kill the Keeper himself. Now, instead of being the target, Myongo is the one who's doomed. While Myongo stands there regretting his life choices, Sanga and Jiliang look at Dokja with admiration. Dokja, as always, just smiles and moves on. Together, they open the box, discovering 2 items, a bracelet and a shield. Dokja isn't particularly excited. If Jung Heewon was here earlier, then he definitely took the best items already. Still, they have one more box left. So without hesitation, Dokja opens it. Inside, he finds a mana brazier. Immediately, he recognizes its value. This is exactly what they need for their next step in the sub-scenario. Wasting no time, Dokja sets up the brazier and begins cooking the ground rat's leg. The moment the meat starts sizzling, an irresistible aroma fills the air. Sanga, Jiliang, and even Hyunsung watch with anticipation, completely entranced by the smell. And as the meat finishes cooking, Dokja takes the first bite. The rest of the group leans in slightly, waiting for his reaction. The meat tastes delicious and Dokja enjoys it, so he gives a piece of the leg to both Sanga and Jiliang. He just had an experience he could only read about before and makes everything taste even better. Then he suddenly hears Myongo's stomach growl loudly. Myongo awkwardly asks if he can join them. When he sits down with the group, Dokja tells him that he'll need energy to fight off his curse. The 4 of them eat happily when Sanga asks how Dokja knew all this. She assumes he knows because he reads a lot of web novels. She feels embarrassed, thinking she can't do much. But Dokja responds that the only reason he can defeat it is because Sanga understands the Keeper. It seems like she caught on. She noticed that Dokja wanted the box for a specific reason. It turns out the box is a random item box. To avoid the question, Dokja praises Sanga for her ability to read the language. As they finish eating, Sanga encourages Dokja to keep whatever item is in the box for himself. Dokja reaches into his pocket and pulls out the Keeper's core, placing it in the box along with Broken Faith. He knows that if he puts random items inside, the box will turn them into something rare or powerful. Biryu has no idea about the box until it's too late. Dokja already places a low-grade object inside, and it's already in the process of turning into a high-grade item. The box begins to glow with a blinding purple light. Biryu immediately shuts down the stream as the box gets brighter and starts rattling. Dokja wants a weapon stronger than an A-grade, and suddenly, a beam of light shoots from the box as the item appears. Dokja realizes the random item box could pose a real threat to the scenario. That's why Biryu is panicking. When he asks Sanga and Jiliang to open the box, they're surprised to find a beautiful sword inside. The sword, called Unbreakable Faith, is a Constellation artifact above any legendary grade items. Dokja decides he wants to keep it, and both Sanga and Jiliang agree with him. Once everything is settled, Dokja tells the group to head back. But Jiliang interrupts, saying that all the bugs are dead, so there's no one left to lead them back. Then Jiliang drops a bombshell. There's still one bug left. His body tenses up and he starts murmuring in some strange language. Dokja and Sanga look at each other, worried, but Jiliang doesn't seem to hear them. Suddenly, a loud rumble shakes the entire place. Jiliang's eyes turn white and blood starts to drip from his nose. Up above, an earthquake shakes the surface too. The layer trembles again, and it turns out that Gillian has been calling one of the giant bugs from outside. It's a mantis, and Gillian has summoned it toward them. Dokja understands the situation immediately and tells Gillian to stop whatever nonsense he is doing. Repeating himself like a frustrated parent dealing with a stubborn child, he waits for the boy to finally listen. After far too long, Gillian finally obeys, making the mantis snap out of its trance. The creature, looking as lost as someone waking up from a bad dream, stands there, dumbfounded. A few seconds later, it takes the smartest action possible. It runs for its life. Meanwhile, the entire layer is about to come crashing down, and Dokja cannot believe that the cause of this disaster is a kid. Staring at Gillian like he has just committed a crime, he warns him never to use that ridiculous skill again unless given permission. Clearly, letting a child control something this dangerous is a terrible idea. Trying to take control of the situation before another disaster happens, Dokja suggests waiting for more bugs to appear. But of course, Sangha, the self-proclaimed problem solver, has to jump in with her own plan. Acting like she is revealing some grand secret, she announces that she can find a way back. Apparently, she has a skill similar to Gilliam's, allowing her to follow a golden thread to guide them. For someone who barely ever has good ideas, she sounds way too confident. Hearing this, Dokja, always the skeptic, asks her about her constellation. Almost immediately, he realizes that she has locked herself under a contract, stopping her from sharing that information. Of course, she would have something like this, because why make things simple? Growing more suspicious, Dokja tries to look her up using his character profiling skill. Instead of getting anything useful, he is met with the most annoying message possible. Her information is still being collected. Apparently, even the system finds her too complicated to deal with. For a moment, Dokja is actually surprised. He has never seen this kind of message before. Before he can think too much about it, a sudden bright yellow flash appears out of nowhere. It is Beyond making his usual over-the-top entrance, looking way too cheerful for someone who barely helps in serious situations. Back at the railway, Beyond proudly hands Heewon a cooked rat's leg as if he is offering a 5-star meal. Somehow, this is supposed to help her recover, but it just looks disgusting. Just as the group continues walking, Beyond starts speaking to Dokja through Dokkaebi communication. Luckily, no one else can hear him, saving Dokja from having to explain whatever nonsense the little creature is about to say. Beyond explains that he was called to the management because he shut down the channel and stretched out his commercials longer than allowed. Instead of feeling guilty or worried, he smirks and shrugs it off like the reckless troublemaker he is. As they continue walking, he and Dokja talk privately about a random item box. Somehow, this box brings up old memories for Beyond. It turns out the box exists because of his never-ending greed, proving once again that he cannot resist hoarding things. A short while later, Heewon, ever observant, notices that Dokja has received another item. Meanwhile, at the back, Hyunsung is busy polishing his shield with a ridiculous grin on his face. He looks like a kid who just got a new toy, clearly enjoying the moment. Apparently, he has started to trust Dokja, which is amusing, considering how skeptical he was before. Heewon, on the other hand, watches them with envy, annoyed that she has not received any items. Reaching the station, they find the atmosphere tense. People are murmuring amongst themselves, too caught up in their own problems to pay attention to anything else. Many look upset and restless, struggling to come to terms with the situation. Some, it turns out, do not have enough coins to pay the survival fee, which has thrown them into full-blown panic mode. A desperate woman is begging others to give her child some coins, and someone even considers paying for it. Meanwhile, Dokja and Heewon notice another woman searching for her sister, who had joined a scouting team. However, the so-called leader assigned to watch over these people acts like an arrogant fool, speaking as if he is above everyone else. This instantly sets off Heewon's attribute, her patience running out. Before anything can happen, Inho shows up, making the already bad situation even worse. Flashing an insufferable smirk, he uses his skill to convince everyone that he has the most coins, clearly enjoying the attention. Seeing the way people at the station start to circle around Dokja and his group, he grins, pleased with himself. The crowd turns desperate, and soon people begin begging Dokja for coins. Inho, ever the manipulator, tries to guilt-trip him into helping. But Dokja, knowing that giving in would cost him 2,000 coins, questions whether these people deserve his help at all. He recalls the core lesson of the scenario. Everyone must take responsibility for themselves. Suddenly, Beyond appears on the screen, reminding them that time is running out. Dokja closes his eyes briefly, ignoring the impatient Constellations waiting for his decision. Then he finally glances at the crowd, making up his mind. He refuses to play along with Inho's twisted game. Instead of handing out coins blindly, he turns to the people and demands a reason why he should help them. Predictably, Inho laughs in the background, already expecting this response. In-ho, never missing a chance to twist reality, shamelessly tells the crowd that they would have survived if Dokja had not sold his food for coins. The desperate fools in the crowd, naturally looking for someone to blame, immediately turn their anger toward Dokja. His party, realizing how quickly things are spiraling out of control, attempts to calm the furious masses. However, In-ho, enjoying the chaos, keeps pushing Dokja to hand over the coins, pretending to be generous when he is just stirring more trouble. Despite the growing hostility, Dokja remains unfazed. His party surrounds him protectively, making it clear that they will not let things escalate without a fight. In-ho's men, always eager to throw punches instead of using their brains, launch an attack. Dokja grips his sword tightly and draws it, preparing for the stupidity about to unfold. One of the attackers, apparently overestimating his own importance, raises his weapon against Dokja. The fight ends before it even starts. Dokja swings his sword in a clean arc, slicing off both of the man's hands in a single strike. The air fills with gasps as everyone watches the severed hands fly. The unfortunate fool collapses, screaming in agony, but no one moves to help him. Instead, they all stare at Dokja, their shot clear. Dokja, completely unimpressed by their reactions, calls them pathetic for blaming him when they are the ones who put themselves in this situation. Checking the man's profile, he quickly realizes that this idiot is far too strong to be just some random thug. There is something more to him. Turning back to face the crowd, Dokja sees fear in their eyes. They are scared, not just of him, but of the whole system that has trapped them. He points out the obvious. Their suffering is not his fault. They let themselves be controlled because they are afraid of the major group's strength, but he demands to know why they accept being weak instead of fighting back. Hearing this, In-ho flinches, his usual smirk momentarily fading. The people murmur among themselves, unsure. Finally, one of them finds the courage to question what Dokja is saying. Attempting to regain control, In-ho starts his usual empty explanations, but Dokja has no patience for nonsense. He cuts him off and throws out a fact that no one wants to acknowledge. Their numbers are shrinking at an alarming rate. Someone weakly argues that it is because of the monsters. Dokja does not buy it. He calls them all fools for failing to see what is right in front of them. Only the Chula gang consistently survives, getting stronger every time they return. The pattern is too obvious to ignore, yet these idiots have been blindly accepting it. Twisting In-ho's own words against him, Dokja reveals the cruel truth. Killing someone gives you coins. In-ho has known this all along, yet he still tries to deny it when the people confront him. Beyond, always entertained by drama, watches with excitement as the crowd shifts its rage toward In-ho. Dokja, seizing the moment, shouts for everyone to take the coins for themselves. The people, already filled with desperation and resentment, react immediately. Meanwhile, In-ho, never one to fight fair, smirks while hiding behind one of his men, waiting for the chaos to unfold. Stepping aside, Dokja raises his sword and points it toward the major group. He makes it clear, this is how the world works now. The crowd, trembling as the realization sinks in, understands that there is no other choice. The situation explodes into violence. People turn on each other in a desperate, bloody struggle, scavenging for weapons and launching an all-out battle against the major group. The station descends into pure madness, proving that survival comes at a brutal cost. Dokja and his party find themselves caught in the middle of absolute chaos. The gang, still thinking they have a chance, foolishly tries to attack him. Holding his newly acquired sword, Dokja does not hesitate. He slices through them like they are nothing, cutting off limbs and scattering blood everywhere. The ones still alive collapse to the ground, their eyes filled with regret. They reach out pathetically, begging for help they will never receive. A sudden movement interrupts the scene. Without warning, the sword is driven straight through the mouth of one of the dying men, silencing his cries forever. The one responsible is Hyuwon, who has finally taken revenge on the man who attempted to rape her. The act, brutally yet justified, triggers something inside her. The hidden presence within her awakens, no longer dormant. Her attribute evolves into something far more powerful, Judge of Evil. A red aura bursts from her body, covering her in a terrifying glow. Her eyes change, manifesting a deep crimson light, and above her head, a massive red sword materializes, floating like an executioner's blade. Dokja, for once, is genuinely shocked. Of all possible attributes, she possesses one of the strongest judgment-based powers. Before he can fully process it, Hyuwon declares her intent to take care of the rest of the gang. A notification appears, stating that from now on, she will always fight alongside Dokja. Wasting no time, Hyuwon steadies herself, inhales deeply, and activates her personal skill. Behind her, an enormous holographic scale emerges, tilting heavily to one side, passing judgment on the wicked. The constellation watching over her grants permission for her to unleash her power. Instantly, her strength surges. Meanwhile, In-ho, proving once again how utterly useless he is, gets beaten up by one of the minor groups. Stumbling back, he looks around, searching for his men, only to realize they are either dead or missing. Then his gaze lands on Heewon, now glowing in red light, standing in the center of the station like an unstoppable force. The massacre begins. Anyone foolish enough to challenge Heewon meets a swift and brutal end. She does not hesitate. Every movement is precise, every attack deadly. Someone tries to strike from behind, thinking they might catch her off guard. It is a mistake. Without even turning fully, she stabs them, her blade cutting through their right shoulder with ease. The rest of the people, including Dokja, simply stand there, watching in stunned silence as she single-handedly slaughters everyone in her path. When the dust settles, the only one left standing is Heewon. She slowly turns, pointing her sword directly at Inho, the last pathetic remnant of the gang. He sits on the ground, completely helpless, his bravado shattered. He glances behind him, hoping to see some of his men still alive, but all he finds are corpses, their bodies lying in pools of blood. Heewon and Dokja exchange a look. Without a word, Dokja gives a small nod, giving her the confirmation she does not even need. Inho, realizing what is about to happen, finally looks up at Dokja with desperation in his eyes. It does not matter. Heewon slashes straight down the center of his face, cutting him cleanly. For a moment, he cannot believe what has happened. His mind struggles to accept that he has lost to them, of all people. Before he can even finish processing it, the pain overtakes him. Blood spills from his face, his body giving out as he crashes to the ground, lifeless. His story ends there in the same blood-stained mess he created. Before anyone can take a breath, the final moment of the survival fee arrives. The system shows no mercy. Those without enough coins drop dead instantly, their lives erased in an instant. The weak, the unprepared, the ones who thought they could just beg their way to survival, they all pay the price. Dokja and his group stare in horror after realizing that people are dying slowly. Heewon, too weak to stand, collapses onto the ground like a broken doll. Dokja, looking far too dramatic for the situation, extends a hand and reminds her that the scenario has only just begun. Desperate, and with no better option, she grabs his hand and rises with his help. The rest of the group, suddenly remembering her existence, moves toward her. After the so-called survival fee is collected, a new notification appears. It announces that they have already arrived at the starting point of the next scenario. Morning arrives, revealing the ugly aftermath of the battle at Gumo Station. Dokja and his group decide to leave, barely saying goodbye to the remaining survivors as if they were just background characters in his grand adventure. Dokja, pretending to care for half a second, acknowledges that the survivors can defend themselves. Without wasting any more time, he moves on with Heewon, a new party member. Meanwhile, Manga disappears without a word, but Dokja, showing his usual lack of concern, doesn't care at all. He orders the group to head to the next location, acting like some kind of commander. Out of nowhere, Heewon punches the arm of Dokja and dumps 1,500 coins on him. She believes she earned the most coins last night and wants to share. Dokja, feeling smug, tells her to keep it, already knowing he made way more thanks to Beyond. The Constellations had apparently been throwing coins at him like he was their favorite streamer, making him richer overnight. Dokja collects his massive earnings from Beyond, who clearly hopes he will forget about their contract. Of course, Dokja doesn't. With over 23,000 coins in hand, he immediately dumps most of it into his stats, thinking ahead to the next money-making opportunity. As soon as they step into a new area, the next scenario activates. This new scenario, called the Encounter, orders them to get through a tunnel and find the first shelter. Heewon, confused as usual, wonders where it is, but Dokja already knows because he memorized the railway map like a nerd. Their next stop is Chungmuro. Before reaching it, they have to fight off an endless wave of disgusting ground rats in the tunnel. The battle drags on until they finally emerge, completely exhausted. Dokja, taking pity on his group for once, lets them rest at Donglek University. Hyunsung, always eager to push forward, suggests they keep moving since Chungmuro is close. Dokja, never missing a chance to ruin expectations, warns that resting might not be possible. On the way, they see corpses of both people and ground rats scattered everywhere. Only one person could be responsible for such a massacre, Joonghyuk. Hearing this, Hyunsung immediately backs down and shifts focus to searching for useful supplies, pretending that was his plan all along. Sangal, looking for a companion, invites Heewon to join her. Dokja glances at them, confused, before realizing they are just going to the bathroom. As if this isn't awkward enough, Hyunsung and Gilleong suddenly decide they also need to go. The great warriors of the apocalypse, reduced to a synchronized restroom trip. Upon reaching the bathroom, Heewon notices that Dokja is missing. Hyunsung, who seems to have an answer for everything, says Dokja went outside. Into the poisoned air, no less. Meanwhile, Dokja is dashing off dramatically, holding his breath like a stubborn child despite being the one who told everyone to rest at Donglek University. His real destination is a shortcut leading to the statue of the great monk Samyeon. Hwon, confused but slightly concerned, asks Hyunsung why Dokja would do something so reckless. Without hesitation, Hyunsung claims Dokja is off on a pilgrimage, as if that makes any sense. Dokja reaches the statue and without a second thought, silently pays his respects. The Constellations, for some reason, reward him with coins as if he is a devoted monk rather than a scheming opportunist. Byung, suspicious as always, wonders what Dokja is up to. The answer comes quickly. Dokja suddenly leaps, swings his sword backward to gain momentum, and then smashes it straight into the statue. The loud crack echoes through the air. Byung, watching in horror, immediately panics. Meanwhile, Dokja, completely unfazed, casually eats his meal while Byung rants about how he just destroyed a sacred idol. Eventually, Dokja tells him to calm down. He knows every idol statue holds power and items, and he needs the great monk's skill to continue toward Chungmuro. In other words, he just committed divine vandalism for personal gain. Again. Dokja, relying on his knowledge from reading Tesa, executes his plan perfectly. Returning to the station, he gets into an argument about the constellation he just angered by destroying the statue. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, he meets Hyuwon and Hyunsung, acting as if nothing happened. Without missing a beat, he casually announces that he brought them some items. Hyuwon receives a robe and Dokja claims it belonged to the great monk Samyeon. She stares blankly, having no clue who that is. Sangha, who meets a set of prayer beads, immediately recognizes the monk as a legendary figure in Korean history, proving that at least one person in the group paid attention in school. Hyuwon, finally realizing the robe has some power, starts appreciating it. Meanwhile, Dokja, in the most shameless move yet, lies straight to their faces. He insists that he was praying at the statue when these items conveniently fell from the sky into his hands. Trying to secure forgiveness, Dokja showers the monk with empty praise, hoping the constellation will take the bait. His party, as gullible as ever, listens to him like he is some wise prophet. Thanks to his sugar-coated words, they all feel grateful to the monk, and just like that, a notification appears, stating that the constellation has forgiven him. Byung, too stunned to speak, watches as Dokja manipulates an ancient celestial being with nothing but flattery. Dokja knows constellations crave recognition and fame more than anything. Seeing Hyuwon happy with her new robe, he effortlessly earns another 100 coins. As they approach Chungmuro, he warns the group to stay alert. Jillian, using his ability, confirms that there are no ground rats nearby. Suspicious of this eerie calm, Dokja prepares for trouble. Stepping forward to suddenly trigger a new sub-scenario. Without hesitation, Dokja tells everyone to stay on guard. The sub-scenario is called Illusory Prison, and they must escape within an hour. The wind picks up, howling through the area. Then a distant cry echoes before the wind grows stronger and faster. In an instant, they are swallowed by darkness. A voice calls out to Dokja. It is his mother. Feeling the presence creeping closer, Dokja senses something unnatural. His mother appears before him, speaking cryptic words about him not seeing anything. In that moment, he pieces everything together. This is an illusion. His fourth wall skill activates, shielding his mind and breaking the hallucination's grip. Regaining consciousness, he quickly realizes that this zone is designed to drive people insane by forcing them to relive their worst traumas. Not wanting his party to crumble into a sobbing mess, he yells at them to get a grip. Dokja realizes it is already too late. His party, weak-minded as ever, is completely consumed by their suffering. Only Sangha remains unaffected, thanks to the glowing beads in her hand. Of course, she has no idea why they work, but luck is on her side. Rushing toward her, Dokja quickly gives her a task, washes back while he destroys the area. Sangha, without questioning his reckless plan, agrees. Standing back to back, they prepare for action. Dokja, as dramatic as ever, warns her that he is about to begin. Thanks to his earlier vandalism of the monk's statue, he obtained a skill that can block the illusory prison. Activating it, he forces the illusion to break. The air clears, but the skill still doesn't work on Hyunsung and Gillian. Before Dokja can react, Hyuwon suddenly charges at him like a mad woman. Her sword swings dangerously close, and he barely dodges. Looking at her glowing red eyes, he realizes the demon-slaying ability has taken over. He specifically gave her the robe to stop this exact problem, yet, as usual, things do not go as planned. Without hesitation, he moves behind her and strikes a pressure point, knocking her out instantly. No time for kindness when his own teammate is trying to kill him. Drawing his sword, he warns everyone to stay on guard. Transparent figures begin rising from the ground. Specters, ghost-like creatures with terrifying power. Unfortunately, Dokja now has to fight one alone. Meanwhile, Hyunsung suddenly wakes up from his dramatic military trauma. His great warrior instincts return, only to reward him with a splitting headache. A true soldier indeed. Dokja, always looking for an extra advantage, collects the Spectre Spirit Stone after eliminating the creatures. Meanwhile, Sanga, acting like she just solved the great mystery, explains that they were caught in the illusory prison and that Dokja saved them. Hyunsung, too exhausted to question anything, thanks him without hesitation. Ji-leong, barely able to stand, wakes up and wobbles like a baby here. Dokja, noticing the kid's obvious distress, suddenly recalls the moment when Ji-leong was on the ground, apologizing to his mother. Of course, among all of them, this child probably has the worst trauma. Attempting to comfort him, Dokja carefully pats Ji-leong's head. Instantly, the boy clings to him and bursts into tears. Great. Now he's got a crying child in his arms, and the whole team is emotionally broken. Sanga, trying to keep him focused, points out a light at the end of the tunnel. Chungmuro is close, but Dokja already knows they are in no shape to fight. His concern is justified when someone suddenly appears in front of them. A hooded figure steps forward and draws her sword, making it clear that this is her territory. Dokja and Sanga immediately recognize her from the stream Byung showed them earlier. More importantly, Dokja recognizes her as a key character from Tiza. This girl is no ordinary survivor. She is the last remaining student from Taepung Girls' High School. Ji removes her hood after spotting the spirit stone in Dokja's hand. Her reaction makes it obvious that she did not expect anyone else to defeat the specter. To her knowledge, only the master in this area should be capable of such a thing. Checking her character profile, Dokja confirms that nothing has changed. She still has the same constellation as in Tessa, the god of naval warfare. As a naval commander, she is one of the main reasons Junghyuk rushed to Chungmuro in the first place. With her skills, she will be useful in the next scenario, though judging by her attitude, she will probably be annoying too. Following Ji, the group finally reaches the station. A notification appears confirming that they have completed the second scenario. Their rewards are accumulated, meaning more coins and resources. Reaching Chungmuro, Sanga immediately tenses up, clearly unsettled by the eerie atmosphere of the station. Dokja, looking around, notices an overwhelming number of other players. The scenario has expanded, dragging even more people into the chaos. One of the men inside the station notices their arrival and greets Ji with a smug attitude. Unfortunately, he and the others are completely drunk, stumbling around like fools. Instead of acting normal, they start questioning Dokja and his group like some kind of security team, except they smell like alcohol and bad decisions. Their behavior towards Sanga is particularly awful, treating her like she doesn't belong. Ji, having no patience for nonsense, immediately warns them to be respectful. Glaring at them, she shoves her sword close to their faces. With the speed of cowards, they all scatter, suddenly remembering they have better things to do. Satisfied with scaring them off, Ji prepares to leave. Dokja, never missing a chance to poke at trouble, immediately asks if Junghyuk is nearby. His question catches Ji off guard. She turns to him, eyes full of suspicion, and grips her sword again, ready to cut him down. He insists that he is Junghyuk's companion, but she doesn't buy it for a second. As if Junghyuk would ever have companions. Dokja only wants to know where Junghyuk is because he has a message for him. Of course, Ji is still not convinced. After thinking for a moment, she decides to check. A boy sitting in the corner, silently observing Dokja's group, lights up when he hears Junghyuk's name. His entire face brightens as if he just met a celebrity. Watching the boy's excitement, Dokja forces himself to match the energy, pretending to be just as happy. He already regrets it. After some time, Dokja and his group finally rest at the station. The boy, too eager to share, starts explaining how Junghyuk became their leader. Dokja listens, but it doesn't take long for boredom to hit. Yawning, he interrupts, letting the boy know he has heard enough. He pities the kid. Junghyuk isn't saving them out of kindness, he is just manipulating them, working to earn Ji-he's trust for his own benefit. But of course, none of them realize this. The boy then tells Hyunsung about Ji-he's role. She hunts the monsters and Junghyuk cooks them. Hyunsung, ever the diligent note-taker, writes everything down like he's preparing for a history exam. Things get more interesting when the boy mentions a landlord coalition. This catches Hyunsung's attention, especially since they already encountered those men earlier. The boy leads them upstairs toward the bathroom. Dokja already knows exactly what this coalition is about. Sanga, confused as usual, asks about the room they are discussing. Meanwhile, Dokja, having read Tiza, knows this whole situation is about to become much worse. The boy points toward a safe zone in the middle of the room, where two people are fighting over it like wild animals. He explains that this is part of their scenario, and that they will understand soon enough. According to him, the Landlord Coalition controls most of the rooms, leaving others to struggle for scraps. Dokja, expecting Junghyuk to have done something about it, asks if he took action. The boy's face immediately drops. Junghyuk, in classic fashion, abandoned them without a second thought. Now Dokja has another problem, figuring out why Junghyuk has completely gone off his intended path in this third round. Reaching the entrance to the bathroom, they find a chaotic scene. Dozens of desperate people beg to be let inside. A man guards the entrance, yelling at them to back off. In the middle of all this, Gil-young, acting on impulse, suddenly bolts forward. Squeezing through the crowd, he moves too fast for anyone to stop him. Unfortunately, his great escape ends in failure when he trips and falls. His hand lands directly on the safe zone, making everyone freeze. A green light instantly turns red, signaling a problem. The guards, sensing trouble, lean in and inspect Gil-young closely. One of them begins questioning him about his parents, while Dokja and the rest of the group rush forward to help. Weapons appear out of nowhere, locking onto Gil-young. He stands frozen, hearing the clicks of automatic guns aiming directly at him. The stigma responsible belongs to Pildagong, and right now, it has turned every single weapon in the room against a child. A notification appears, stating that Pildu demands 500 coins as payment. One of the men immediately stretches out his hand, demanding the money from Gil-young like some kind of street thug. Meanwhile, the weapons, acting like they have minds of their own, prepare to fire. Behind the red line, the crowd does absolutely nothing. They stand there, watching, feeling sorry for the boy, but not lifting a single finger to help. Dokja quickly tells Sangda to watch over Heewon before stepping forward. The man in charge immediately turns to him and repeats his demand minus 500 coins, a blatant extortion attempt. Dokja, annoyed but also curious, wonders why Junghyuk allowed this situation to happen. Meanwhile, Jia heads off to find Junghyuk and inform him of the mess that has just happened. Dokja recalls the 10 evils, the main antagonists in every regression. Among them, Pildagong stands as one of the worst. The bathroom has a strict limit, only 70 people can enter. Of course, this means not everyone gets a chance. After pulling Gil-young back behind the line, Dokja asks why the place is locked. The man in charge smugly explains that access is no longer free. Instead of arguing, Dokja agrees to pay but insists on giving the money directly to Pildagong. Using his profiling skill, he quickly confirms that none of these low-level thugs are Pildu. Deciding to speed things up, he calls Pildu out in front of everyone. Stepping forward, he deliberately enters their zone, causing the weapons to activate. The deadly machines lock onto him instantly, but he continues walking as if he owns the place. Before he can take another step, a voice stops him. A man sits in the corner, casually flipping through a magazine, clearly unbothered by the chaos. Without even looking up, he threatens Dokja, making it clear that he doesn't tolerate intruders. Dokja, unfazed, points out that he only wants to pay and has no reason to be scared. This catches Pildu's attention. Finally, the man puts down his magazine and adjusts his hat, showing just enough interest. Reading Pildu's character profile, Dokja isn't surprised. The man is both powerful and intelligent, annoyingly so. Considering his options, Dokja debates whether to strike a deal or simply kill him. Before he can decide, Pildu notices Dokja's hand resting on his sword, already suspecting his intentions. Meanwhile, Dokja's party finds themselves completely surrounded by Pildu's men. Seeing the situation turn against him, Dokja raises his hands and offers to become a tenant. Pildu immediately refuses, reminding him that only coalition members get a place. Dokja, expecting this response, quickly switches tactics. Instead of begging, he offers something valuable: information. Pildu remains unimpressed until Dokja brings up Junghyuk. The entire room tenses. Just hearing that name changes the mood instantly. In Tisa, Junghyuk is supposed to fight against the landlord coalition. Pildu, now fully interested, asks what Dokja knows about him. Without hesitation, Dokja claims they are companions who have fought side by side. Pildu, not easily convinced, activates his calculation skill, warning Dokja that he has something to lose if he tries to run. Realizing he can't force his way through, Dokja chooses to back off. Walking away, he assumes the conversation is over. Pildu, however, stops him again. For a brief moment, Dokja thinks he has gained the upper hand. That illusion quickly shatters when Pildu simply demands coins. Not just 500, but 1,000. Dokja, refusing to be robbed in broad daylight, flat out declines. This immediately triggers the weapons, which begin to fire at him. His party shouts, telling him to escape into the crowd. Right at that moment, a deafening explosion shakes the entire room. A blinding flash fills the air, and Dokja barely manages to protect himself. The fire does not reach him because Hyunsung jumps in front of him. He tries to shield Dokja, but his power is limited. Dokja understands that his group is not ready to fight. Suddenly, he realizes something and quickly tells Pildu to stop. Pildu becomes alarmed when Dokja warns that he will die in his seat if they continue fighting. As they speak, someone approaches them. Right after Dokja finishes speaking, Junghyuk and Ji enter the room. Junghyuk looks around, unimpressed. When he notices Dokja waving at him, his face changes and he becomes irritated. Pildu is shocked that Dokja actually knows him. Dokja activates his Omniscient Reader Viewpoint skill and stares at Junghyuk. Junghyuk feels surprised to see Dokja alive. She shifts her gaze between them in disbelief. She cannot believe that Dokja and Junghyuk know each other. They lock eyes and Dokja asks about Junghyuk's well-being. Then he asks Junghyuk to confirm that they are truly companions and to help him get access to the bathroom. Junghyuk stands there silent. He has no way to take back his words. Everyone around them is stunned, mostly because it is rare to see anyone talk over Junghyuk and live to tell the tale. After a moment of hesitation, Junghyuk finally draws his sword. Dokja, instead of looking worried, grins at him like he just won the lottery. Junghyuk stands alone in the empty corridor, probably questioning all of his life choices that led him to this moment. He arrives just in time to save them, which is ironic because everyone knows he would rather be anywhere else than helping Dokja. Annoyance flickers across Junghyuk's face. He never expects to see Dokja breathing, much less smiling at him. Ji looks between them completely baffled, as if someone just told her the sky is green. Dokja already knows the truth. Junghyuk does not see him as a companion. Junghyuk does not even see him as a person. Instead of arguing, Dokja turns to Pildu and wordlessly pressures him into letting them use the bathroom. Pildu, who probably values his own life more than arguing right now, stays silent. Junghyuk's gaze remains cold. If looks could kill, Dokja would be 6 feet under already. Dokja clenches his fist, tempted to punch Junghyuk right in his smug face. He takes one glance at Junghyuk's stats and immediately rethinks his life choices. He knows that if he throws a punch, Junghyuk will throw him straight into another dimension. This version of Junghyuk is much stronger than the one in the novel, which makes no sense. Dokja wonders how this overpowered lunatic got even stronger. He stares at Junghyuk for too long and, unsurprisingly, gets caught. He quickly snaps back, but his reaction only fuels Junghyuk's irritation. Junghyuk, probably exhausted from all this nonsense, briefly considers eliminating Dokja just to save himself the headache. Before he can act on it, Heewon wakes up, instantly shifting everyone's focus. Junghyuk's sharp eyes notice something. Dokja actually has his own companion. For some reason, this disappoints him. Maybe he hoped Dokja was a lonely cockroach crawling around on his own. He uses his Sage's Eyes skill and quickly confirms his suspicions. Dokja barely contributes anything to Hyunsung's strength, which makes Junghyuk wonder why he is even here. Dokja, reading Junghyuk's mind with his skill, feels irritated. He already knows he is just a regular guy who happens to know the future, but hearing it indirectly still stings. Before he can argue, Junghyuk's expression suddenly changes. He looks at something, or someone, in Dokja's group, and for the first time he seems genuinely shocked. Dokja, now curious, tries to figure out what caught Junghyuk's attention. He suspects it might be Heewon, but he hesitates to ask. If he does, Junghyuk might figure out that he can read minds, and that is the last thing he needs right now. Heewon quickly notices that Junghyuk is staring and does not hesitate to call them out. Meanwhile, Dokja picks up on something even more concerning. Junghyuk is thinking about killing someone, and that is never a good sign. Without wasting time, Dokja distracts him by bringing up Pildu and asking why he let him do whatever he wanted. Junghyuk, instead of giving a proper answer, throws the question back at Dokja, saying that someone who claims to be a prophet should already know. Dokja, unimpressed, casually reminds him that he is not all-knowing. Junghyuk does not seem convinced, so he uses his skill to check if Dokja is lying. Dokja immediately feels irritated. Of course, Junghyuk does not trust anyone. That is just who he is, a walking paranoia machine. After that, Junghyuk finally explains that he needs Pildu alive. Dokja instantly realizes that Junghyuk only cares about Pildu, not the rest of his group. That raises a question in Dokja's mind. If Junghyuk does not need them, why did he let them live? Junghyuk, as expected, refuses to answer. Annoyance flashes across Junghyuk's face. He finds Dokja irritating and believes he would not understand even if he explained. Dokja warns him that ignoring the problem will only make things worse, but Junghyuk does not care. He turns to leave, fully intending to walk away like this is not his problem. Dokja, frustrated, feels the urge to punch him. Junghyuk, never missing a chance to be dramatic, dares him to try, activating his self-defense skill as if he is ready for a fight. Dokja does nothing, and Junghyuk, knowing exactly how this would end, leaves with Ji. However, Ji glances back at Dokja. Unlike Junghyuk, she sees the problem and understands that Dokja is right. She cannot figure out why Junghyuk refuses to deal with it. Dokja then checks his notifications. The main scenario only has an hour and a half left. Dokja sits apart from his group, deep in thought. Unlike Junghyuk, he cannot just ignore everything and walk away. He curses Junghyuk for being so careless. Heewon, noticing his frustration, mocks him for being scared of Junghyuk. Dokja, of course, refuses to admit anything and shifts the focus to Pildu, pointing out that he is a much bigger problem. Meanwhile, Sangha approaches Gilleong, who is busy with his bugs. Heewon, unlike the others, has a much simpler solution in mind. Just kill Pildu and be done with it. She does not see the point in letting someone monopolize a public facility. Before Dokja can stop her, she activates her skill. A scale appears, signaling judgment. However, before anything happens, it slowly vanishes. A notification appears, revealing that her constellation does not approve. Heewon stares at it, completely confused. She has no idea what just happened and assumes her skill is broken. Dokja corrects her, explaining that the skill only works if the constellations see the target as truly evil. Just because humans think someone is bad does not mean the constellations agree. Heewon, understandably, thinks this is ridiculous. Dokja, not wanting to argue, tells her there is another way to deal with Pildu. He admits that it is complicated but assures her that there is a plan. He then explains Pildu's arms zone skill. Pildu can protect certain areas, but the moment he steps outside his room, everything disappears. The challenge is getting him to leave because he already has everything he needs inside. Pildu has the largest room in the station, making him even harder to remove. Suddenly, a notification pops up. Only an hour remains before the scenario begins. Heewon notices something inside Pildu's room and realizes that Pildu is worried about losing his space. Dokja, seeing the situation, tells the group to discuss it later and focus on finding rooms for themselves. Before they can act, Baeyong appears, grinning the moment he spots Dokja and his group at the station. Baeyong snaps his fingers and a notification appears in front of everyone. The main scenario is called Safe Zone. It explains that they must enter a safe zone to avoid being attacked by monsters that will appear at night. The attack will last for 8 hours. Anyone who secures a safe zone will receive 1,000 coins as compensation. There is only an hour left before it begins. Hyunsung and Sangha stare at the notification, shocked. Baeyong, clearly enjoying the chaos, casually mentions that if someone has no place left, they can always take a safe zone from someone else. Panic spreads instantly. People rush to claim any safe zone they can find, pushing and shoving to get ahead. Some even start fighting each other over the spaces. Dokja and his party stand back and watch as everything quickly turns into a bloodbath. People are killing each other over shelter, and the ground is soon covered in blood. Sangha looks at the chaos, worried that they might have to fight too. Dokja tells her they need to find a place that can fit all of them. Most of the rooms he sees are small, only large enough for one person. However, there is a much bigger room that can hold around 70 people. Pildu's room. He tells his group to spread out and find a room big enough for all of them. If they cannot find one, they must regroup at the same place. As his party spreads out to search, Dokja takes out his phone. He reads Tessa and realizes something important: there are no rooms left. A troubling thought crosses his mind. If they find nothing, will this group be willing to kill someone for a spot? Meanwhile, Heewon and Gillian fail to find an empty room. Sangha and Hyunsung have no luck either. Time keeps slipping away. With only 30 minutes left before the scenario starts, Dokja sits quietly in the middle of the battlefield, completely ignoring the fights happening around him. He keeps reading his phone while others struggle for survival. Baeyong suddenly appears and demands to know what he is doing. Dokja quickly realizes that if the Constellations can read Tessa too, this could be a big problem. However, instead of commenting on that, Baeyong scolds him for staring at a blank screen for so long. The Constellations are growing restless. Dokja, confused, holds up his phone to the ceiling. Baeyong looks unimpressed and warns him that he will get himself killed if he keeps acting like a lunatic. Dokja cannot believe what he just heard. Even Baeyong cannot see the text. That raises an even bigger question. What kind of being sent him this novel? Before he can dwell on it, a scream breaks through the chaos. He turns his head and sees someone standing over a dead body. The person had just killed someone else for a safe zone. Dokja moves closer, but the murderer immediately raises his weapon and threatens him. Before Dokja can respond, Ji suddenly walks up to him. She comments on how calm he is, which surprises him. He turns the question back to her, pointing out that she seems unfazed as well. Jai explains that no one will try to take her room because only Pildu's gang or Junghyuk are strong enough to challenge her. She then admits somewhat reluctantly that she does not want Dokja to die. She has started to like him for standing up to Junghyuk, which is a rare sight. Dokja, never one to back down, assures her that he has no plans to die. Jiggy, curious, wonders if Dokja is as strong as Junghyuk. Right at that moment, Junghyuk appears. He tells Jihee to return to her room. Then he turns to Dokja and warns him that if he and his group try to fight the monsters, they will die. Dokja, instead of acting concerned, simply grins and challenges him. Junghyuk does not say another word. He just walks away, probably tired of Dokja's nonsense. Not long after, Dokja's entire group returns. Their expressions show frustration. None of them found a room. Pildu, in his usual greedy fashion, decides to raise the rent. This immediately angers Heewon, who already has enough reasons to dislike him. Meanwhile, Hyunsung turns to Dokja, asking if he managed to find a room. Dokja, as expected, has nothing. He tells them that their options are now limited to only 2 choices. Everyone looks at him, waiting for an explanation. The first option is safer and can save everyone. The second option is much riskier. After hearing this, the group quickly agrees to go with the first choice. Sega asks what the plan is, so Dokja leads them upstairs. There he points to a small room that can hold 5 people. The problem is already occupied. Without hesitation, Dokja tells them that the first choice is to kill the people inside and take the room for themselves. Sangha, Heewon, and Hyunsung stare at him in shock, completely unprepared for that answer. Gillian, however, does not even flinch. If Dokja tells him to do it, he looks more than ready to act. Sangha, horrified, immediately moves to stop Gillian. Heewon, trying to make sense of it, questions Dokja about his decision. Dokja explains that the people inside had already killed others for that safe zone. Since there is no time left, they cannot afford to keep searching. Heewon, instead of calming down, grows more frustrated. She reminds him that she has already killed before back at Gumo, but that does not mean she is comfortable doing it again. She does not want to be a monster. From behind, Hyunsung speaks up and asks about the second option. Dokja smiles, knowing exactly how they feel about the first choice. Seeing that reaction, Heewon's anger fades. She suddenly bursts into laughter, realizing that Dokja never planned to take the first option seriously. He was just messing with them. She then starts hitting him multiple times, annoyed that he put them through that stress just to push them toward the second option. Dokja, unfazed by her reaction, looks down at Gilliong and gently strokes his hair. No matter what happens, he will always respect everyone's decision. Then he tells the group to listen carefully. Even if his plan does not seem logical, they have no choice but to follow it. Their lives depend on it. A notification appears in front of them. Only 5 minutes remain before the scenario begins. Dokja then explains the situation. The monsters will come from the red gateway at the end of the railway. To survive, they must escape to Line 3 and go up to the surface. Since they cannot fight the monsters directly, Dokja splits the group into two. Hyunsung, Sangha, and Heewon will wait on the railway, while he prepares for the next step. A notification appears, signaling the start of the scenario. The red gateway slowly fades, and almost immediately, monsters begin to appear, roaring as they emerge. Dokja, without wasting a second, tells the others to run straight toward them. He adds that they must move as soon as the monsters charge. Even though doubt lingers in their minds, they have no time to hesitate. They start running. Before the scenario begins, Dokja picks up a rock and hurls it forward. The moment it makes contact, the red gateway electrocutes it. This confirms his theory. He quickly directs their attention to the left wall. As expected, the moment the monsters start closing in, the three of them rush toward it. Sangha keeps her eyes fixed on the wall, scanning it carefully. It does not take long before she spots something unusual. A safe zone is attached to the wall. Without thinking, she reaches out and touches it. A notification immediately appears, confirming that she has discovered a hidden safe zone within the station. The zone activates instantly, creating a barrier around her and Heewon. Just as she turns around, she sees Hyunsung struggling. One of the monsters attacks him, forcing him to use his shield to block the attack. He holds his ground, but the monster is strong. Before it can overwhelm him, Sangha reacts quickly. She uses her gold thread and pulls him into the hidden zone just in time. However, the safe zone has a strict limit. It can only hold 3 people. That leaves Dokja and Gilliong outside with nowhere to go. The group, now safe, watches in concern. Dokja already knows that another hidden safe zone is stuck to the wall, but it will not activate until the scenario starts. With no time to waste, he grabs Gilliong and bolts, dodging the incoming monsters. He carries the boy on his back and keeps running, not daring to slow down. When they glance behind them, they see monsters swarming the area. One of them nearly reaches them. Before it can strike, Gilliong reacts fast. He swings his weapon and lands a hit. Dokja, still moving, kicks away another monster on his right, barely keeping his balance. Dokja knows there are 3 hidden safe zones on the platform. He searches quickly and finally spots one. Relief does not last long. Someone is already inside. The safe zone is small and can only fit 1 person. The occupant, a terrified man, clings to the space as if his life depends on it. His whole body trembles. It is obvious that he will not be moving anytime soon. Dokja continues fighting the monsters with Gilliong blocking and striking whenever an opening appears. Then, out of nowhere, Byeon appears right above the man inside the safe zone. With a snap of his fingers, he adds a penalty, instantly making the safe zone vanish. The poor man barely has time to react before the monsters swarm him. He is torn apart within seconds. As the monsters rip through their unlucky victim, Dokja quickly puts Gilliong down. There is no time to waste. Together, they prepare to fight. While swinging his sword, Dokja cannot help but think about Joonghyuk. That lunatic has the strength to fight like this all night. Dokja wonders if he can do the same. He grips his sword tightly, channels energy into it until it glows white, then swings. The blade slices cleanly through the monster in front of him, killing it instantly. He and Gilliong fight side by side, covering each other. Then, out of nowhere, Gilliong speaks. He tells Dokja to leave him behind. Dokja stops for a moment, surprised. He turns his head and blocks an incoming attack with ease. Gilliong, still fighting, questions why Dokja even bothers helping them when he couldn't have left any time. Dokja does not know how to answer. The words catch him off guard, distracting him from the monsters still trying to rip him apart. Instead of replying, Dokja just stares at Gilliong, watching him fight bravely despite everything. He has no idea why he is still here. Maybe it is because he is tired of watching people die. Maybe he just does not like leaving loose ends. Meanwhile, Sangha, Heewon, and Hyunsung watch from a distance. They cannot see much through the chaos, but they know the situation is bad. Dokja, on the other hand, is completely fine. He tightens his grip on his sword and without hesitation executes his technique. In an instant, his blade moves faster than the eye can follow. More than 10 slashes tear through the air, slicing apart every monster around them. Jilliong, still holding his weapon, stands frozen. His mouth slightly opens in disbelief. He cannot even find the words to react. Dokja, ignoring his stunned expression, picks him up and tells him something about a story he once read. The main character made a terrible decision, and it did not end well. As they lock eyes, Dokja understands something. He is not the main protagonist of this world. He was never meant to be. But that does not mean he will let Jilliong die today. Suddenly, a blue holographic barrier forms around the safe zone nearby. More monsters approach, their eyes locked onto them. Dokja does not hesitate. He tells Jilliong to hold on tightly. Then he activates his bookmark skill. 3 names appear, Namwoon, Hyunsung, and Inho. Without wasting time, he selects Namwoon's skill. Power surges through his body as he charges forward. His sword swings with newfound strength, cutting down every monster in his way. With Jilliong securely in his arms, he fights through the horde, refusing to slow down. While running, he suddenly spots a glowing safe zone ahead. It is behind a pack of monsters, all ready to kill anything that gets too close. Dokja refuses to give up. He pushes forward, jumps high, aiming to land inside the zone before the monsters can reach him. The moment he sees inside, his expression drops. The safe zone, which only fits 2 people, is already occupied. Inside, sitting comfortably, is Junghyuk. Junghyuk stands among the bodies of defeated monsters, completely unbothered. When he finally notices Dokja, it's clear he doesn't care much. Dokja curses his luck as he lands. He calls out to Junghyuk, glaring at him like he's the cause of all his problems. He demands him to move, insisting that someone as strong as him should fight instead. But Junghyuk, full of himself as always, claims he is too tired. Dokja knows Junghyuk shouldn't even be aware of this hidden zone yet, since he only discovered it in his 4th round in Tisa. The fact that he's already sitting here like a king is just adding to Dokja's frustration. His thoughts are interrupted when he notices Jilliong also glaring at Junghyuk. The kid looks just as annoyed, probably wondering how this guy always gets away with everything. Junghyuk glances at the kid, and for once, they seem to agree on something. They both want to save him. In the end, Jilliong stays inside the safe zone with Junghyuk, but he is restless. He keeps trying to go to Dokja, and Junghyuk has to physically hold him back. Meanwhile, Dokja fights off the endless wave of monsters refusing to fall. Junghyuk suddenly speaks, warning Dokja of his impending death. Dokja turns slightly, but instead of looking worried, he just smirks. He clearly has no intention of dying, even as the monsters keep swarming him from all sides. For a moment, it looks like he can hold his ground, but then the sheer number of creatures becomes too much. In an instant, he disappears under a mountain of monsters. Jilliong's eyes fill with tears as he repeatedly calls out to Dokja, his voice desperate. Junghyuk stares at the scene, struggling to believe what just happened. His sharp eyes catch a detail most would have missed. Just before the monsters overwhelmed Dokja, he broke the Spectre Spirit's stone and swallowed it. Junghyuk watches with doubt, questioning whether Dokja can actually use it. But before he can think further, Dokja vanishes beneath the monsters, completely out of sight. A strange blue gas rises from the middle of the monster horde, followed by a loud hissing sound. Jilliong keeps calling out for Dokja, his voice filled with panic. When a system notification appears, it announces that illusory prison has been activated. Another message quickly follows, revealing that Dokja has now become a ghost species. When Dokja opens his eyes, a sharp headache immediately hits him. Something feels off, and soon, his attention is drawn to a scene behind him. It is a memory he would rather forget, the moment his mother killed his father. His 4th wall skill, now weakened because of his ghost form, fails to fully protect him. His head pounds as he watches his father lying lifeless in a pool of blood, while his mother stands beside the body, completely unshaken. He sees it all from behind her, just like before, but this time he is painfully aware of every detail. He knows he must fight against this memory, but the more he tries, the worse his headache becomes. Struggling to breathe, Dokja finally forces the memory out of his mind using what remains of his 4th wall skill. He is surprised that it still works at all. Anyone else would have lost their sanity attempting the same thing. The Spectre Stone he swallowed is the reason for all of this, a last-ditch gamble on his part. It grants temporary invisibility from the monsters, but the cost is brutal. It drags up buried trauma, forcing the user to relive their worst nightmares. He checks his system notifications, deciding to wait until his 4th wall skill fully recovers. However, his thoughts are interrupted when a woman suddenly appears behind him, calling out Junghyuk's name. She clearly mistakes him for someone else, but realization quickly sets in. Dokja, already exhausted from one trauma, wonders if another one has just shown up to haunt him. He eyes the woman suspiciously, something about her making him uneasy. She stares at him, her left eye glowing red, as if she is trying to figure out who he is. Dokja immediately attempts to analyze her, but a warning pops up. She has activated a mental barrier skill. His profiling ability, however, is not so easily blocked. Within moments, the skill breaks through and compiles her information. Just as he expected, she is Anna Croft. She is the true prophet of Tessa and has a terrifying ability to enter people's minds without limits. Dokja, not one to back down, calls her by name and claims to be a prophet as well. Unfortunately for him, Anna has lie detection skills, and she immediately catches him in his bluff. Without wasting any time, she demands to know who he really is. Dokja assumes she must have sensed his presence because his fourth wall skill had been weakened. He pauses for a moment, considering his next words carefully. Instead of answering her directly, he throws the question back at her, asking if she truly wants to know him. Then he reveals something shocking. He is the one who obtained the ichthyosaur nucleus, the very thing that Anna now uses in her eyes. The moment he says this, she visibly reacts, clearly surprised that he knows about it. Slowly, his fourth wall skill regains its full strength. The moment it fully recovers, Anna's presence begins to fade from his sight. Just before she vanishes completely, Dokja taunts her, telling her to wait for him. Then she disappears, leaving him with a system notification stating that he is now protected from the effects of the illusory prison. Finally freed from its grasp, he sits down, frustrated at how long it took to break free. Exhaustion hits him all at once. He leans back, completely drained, and starts thinking about his party. His breath is unsteady, and a lingering worry gnaws at him. He isn't even sure if the scenario is still ongoing. His thoughts barely settle before a voice calls out to him repeatedly, snapping him awake. As he opens his eyes, his party surrounds him, all of them looking just as worn out. He immediately sits up, his mind going straight to the scenario. His first concern is whether it is still running, but his party quickly reassures him. They survive the night. His relief, however, does not last long. When he looks to his left, the sight is grim. Bodies are scattered everywhere. Two survivors sit against the wall, staring into nothing, completely broken from the loss of their party. Despite everything, Dokja reminds his group that they still have 3 more nights to endure. When he tries to stand up, Hyunsung stops him, insisting that he should rest a little longer. Realizing how exhausted he is, Dokja checks the time. Luckily, it is still early, which gives them some time to recover. Then a new worry enters his mind. He doesn't see Jilliang anywhere. Dokja freezes for a moment when he spots Junghyuk talking to Jilliang. The two seem deep in conversation, but he can't hear what they are saying. His mind starts making connections. Earlier, Junghyuk hadn't seen Heewon, but Jilliang instead. Up close, Junghyuk looks as serious as ever, and Jilliang stands his ground, refusing whatever offer Junghyuk is throwing him. The so-called Great Regressor promises that he will make Jilliang stronger if he follows him, but the kid doesn't budge. Annoyed, Dokja activates his Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint to peek into Junghyuk's thoughts. His irritation only grows when he realizes that Junghyuk, unsurprisingly, thinks very little of him. Before Dokja can react, Jilliang notices that he is awake and rushes toward him without hesitation. Meanwhile, Junghyuk walks away, already lost in his own world. Dokja overhears something about a plan for the night, but exhaustion weighs on him too heavily to process it. Holding Jilliang close, he wonders what Junghyuk is up to this time. Sleep takes over before he can find out. His body finally gives in and everything fades away. Junghyuk continues walking without looking back while Ji watches him, curiosity growing in her eyes. A system notification interrupts the quiet, announcing that the scenario's 3rd day has officially ended. Hours later, Dokja wakes up to the annoying voice of Byung, using the communication skill to snap him out of sleep. Before he even gets his bearings, Heewon notices him stirring and immediately takes the opportunity to tease him. Apparently, he has been sleeping in Hyunsung's lap the whole time. Hyunsung, still deep in sleep, mumbles something about his time in the military, making Dokja feel like he has been dragged into basic training all over again. Sitting up, Dokja finally pulls himself together, and Byung wastes no time in shoving a list of notifications in his face. One of them catches his attention. Some constellation is too curious about his past and has gifted him 1,800 coins. Instead of being happy, he feels irritated. The last thing he wants is for those cosmic voyeurs to dig into his history. Another notification appears, detailing his reward for surviving the night without using the safe zone. The numbers are satisfying. His total balance now exceeds 20,000 coins, which is a nice bonus after everything he has gone through. Feeling a little better, he helps Heewon adjust a pillow under Jilliang's head to make him more comfortable. Heewon then brings up a question, wondering if they will repeat the same strategy for tonight. Dokja immediately shuts that idea down, calling it a one-time deal. Instead, he suggests something better that will end the scenario of today. His first step is taking down Pildu, who is still sitting comfortably in his safe zone, probably thinking he is untouchable. Dokja wakes Hyunsung and casually starts a conversation with him. After a moment, he brings up something interesting. Hyunsung has been talking in his sleep. More specifically, he had referred to himself as Private Hyunsung Lee. Dokja, knowing full well that Hyunsung is a commissioned officer, finds this amusing. The others, including Sangha, Gilleong, and Heewon, listen in as Hyunsung explains. He clarifies that he was eventually promoted at the end of his service. His expression darkens slightly, making it clear that this isn't exactly a happy memory for him. Dokja understands that it must not have been easy for Hyunsung, but instead of dwelling on it, he decides this is the perfect moment to put his plan into motion. With a warm smile, he tells Hyunsung how grateful he is to have him in the group. Hyunsung, clearly touched, seems to appreciate the words. Dokja doesn't stop there, he lays on more compliments before casually walking away. He heads towards Sangha, Heewon, and Gilleong and immediately tells them to follow his lead. Gilleong glances over at Hyunsung while Dokja explains that cheering him up would be a nice thing to do, since he has been looking a bit down lately. Of course, that's only half the truth. What Dokja actually wants is for Hyunsung's attribute to evolve in Gumo, but instead it seems like Heewon is the one who benefited from it. Still, he needs Hyunsung to grow stronger if they are going to handle both Joonghyuk and Pildu. Meanwhile, Hyunsung sits off to the side, quietly wiping his shield. The words Dokja said clearly affected him, while the others accept that this is probably the best thing they can do. Heewon, however, starts overthinking things. She wonders if Dokja's constellation is some kind of one-eyed fortune teller, referencing someone named Gungi. Dokja has no idea who that is, so he simply brushes it off and claims he just has a good sense of people. Keeping up his act, Dokja tells them that they should take turns cheering Hyunsung up. He even gives this ridiculous effort a name, calling it an intermission scenario titled Well Done. The first person up is Heewon. She walks over and tells Hyunsung that his personality is strong and steady, like a pine tree. Hyunsung, appreciating the compliment, brightens up a little. Everything seems to be going well, until he starts talking about his favorite song. Heewon, uninterested, bluntly points out that she never asked about it. Hyunsung instantly deflates, his brief happiness disappearing in an instant. Dokja covers his face with his palm, already regretting trusting Heewon with something like this. She clearly has no idea how to cheer someone up. Next, it's Sangha's turn. Unlike Heewon, she genuinely seems moved by the kind of person Hyunsung is. She tells him that he is fair and good, someone worth respecting. Hyunsung, surprised, never expected to hear something like that. He takes a moment before thanking her, clearly touched by the words. Dokja feels satisfied that Sangha handled her part perfectly. When it is Gilleong's turn, he keeps it simple, only complimenting Hyunsung's appearance. Somehow, that alone is enough to boost Hyunsung's confidence. Dokja never thought someone as strong as Hyunsung would struggle with self-esteem, but at least their ridiculous plan actually works. Heewon, watching everything unfold, seems baffled by how easy it was. Meanwhile, Hyunsung, now sitting against the wall, remains quiet. A system notification appears, showing that his attribute is now waiting to evolve. Dokja, noticing that Gilleong has returned, praises him for his good work, and then reminds him about the favor he asked for earlier. Gilleong casually speaks to the bugs in his hair before giving Dokja an answer. Jae is currently on the first basement floor. Without hesitation, Dokja leaves his party and heads upstairs. He has another goal in mind, recruiting Jae. However, on his way, he encounters Pildu's gang. He ignores them completely, focusing instead on counting the safe zones in the room. The gang members try to strike up a conversation, offering him a place among them because of his connection with Joonghyuk. Dokja once again pretends they don't exist and continues heading upstairs, noticing that many safe zones are already occupied. A realization hits him. The number of safe zones in the station is dwindling quickly. Before he can move forward, one of the gang members steps up to confront him. Dokja brushes him off, vaguely saying he will consider the offer before walking away. Just as he is about to reach the first basement floor, something unexpected happens. Jigi's sword suddenly appears right behind him. He stands there, her blade inches from his face, making it very clear that she is not playing around. She has overheard his conversation with Pildu's gang and warns him about the possible consequences. Her expression is full of disappointment, convinced that he is seriously considering their offer. She keeps her sword raised, but her expression shifts when she realizes that Dokja came all this way just to see her. Without another word, she lowers her blade. Before Dokja can even react, she vanishes from sight. A second later, she reappears, now positioned at the top of the stairs. Dokja, not wanting to waste time, moves to follow her. She finally speaks, questioning what he wants. He He notices her posture, standing firm as if she is waiting for something. Then she reveals the reason for her presence. Junghyuk ordered her to guard this place and not let anyone through. Dokja stares at her, completely caught off guard. He never expected her to be so obedient to Junghyuk. A sense of urgency creeps into his mind. If Ji is already this devoted to Junghyuk, then he needs to act fast. His plan has to happen now. Ji looks genuinely surprised when Dokja suddenly asks for her help in taking down Pildu's gang that night. She stares at him in silence, trying to figure out if he is being serious or if this is just another one of his ridiculous ideas. When Dokja returns to the group, Heewon is quick to doubt that Ji will actually help them. Dokja, however, remains confident. He believes she will come around. Meanwhile, Ji stays behind, staring at the ground, deep in thought. Her conversation with Dokja lingers in her mind. He had told her there was a way for them to win if she joined them. But it was obvious that Junghyuk had already left his mark on her, making her hesitant. So Dokja did what he does best. He hit her with something unexpected. He reminded her that he had seen her first scenario at her school. The moment he says it, she freezes, completely caught off guard. Dokja goes on, revealing that he knows she had killed her friend and that it wasn't something she had ever wanted to do. Ji slams her sword into the ground, demanding that he stop talking. The topic is clearly painful for her and she doesn't appreciate him driving it up. But Dokja, unbothered as ever, explains that he simply said what was on his mind. Then, without holding back, he adds that if she refuses to help, she will regret it for the rest of her life. She crouches on the floor, her mind racing. She thinks long and hard about his words. Dokja checks his phone, noticing that it is already 7 p.m. He gathers his party and warns them that the night ahead will be far more dangerous than before. Heewon, Sangha, and Juliang move together, preparing to follow the plan as discussed. Meanwhile, Dokja stays with Hyunsung, going over the details of their part. Ji remains on the floor, still undecided, but something in her expression shifts. Eventually, she makes her choice. Their target for the night is clear. They are going after Pildu. A notification appears, displaying that only 5 hours remain until the scenario begins. Dokja instructs Sangha and Heewon to take Juliang to platform 4. As they walk upstairs, people inside the safe zone begin to take notice. Tension fills the air. Heewon, now at the front, approaches 2 men blocking their path. She doesn't hesitate. Without a word, she draws her sword. Lifting it behind her back, she offers a brief apology, one that probably isn't very sincere, before swinging the blade. A loud crash follows, shattering the silence. Meanwhile, Dokja and Hyunsung ascend the stairs together. As they move, Hyunsung suddenly speaks, catching Dokja's attention. Doubt lingers in his voice. He is uncertain of his own ability, second-guessing his role in the plan. Dokja, knowing full well that the entire strategy depends on him, wastes no time in reassuring him. Hyunsung listens, but there is still hesitation in his eyes. After a pause, he admits something surprising. Throughout his entire military career, not a single person had ever relied on him for anything. Dokja never knew this detail about Hyunsung when reading Tiza, and now curiosity sparks within him. He wants to learn more about Hyunsung's past. Before he can ask anything, Hyunsung suddenly stops in the middle of the stairs. Dokja turns to look at him, confused, and Hyunsung speaks again. He admits that every time they talk, it feels as if they have known each other for a long time. His expression softens, showing a rare moment of happiness, but before he can finish, chaos erupts. Pildu's gang stands ahead, holding a hostage, a woman pleading for help. The sight immediately kills any warmth in the moment. Both Dokja and Hyunsung are clearly disgusted by what they see. When Dokja glances at Hyunsung, he notices that his face has completely darkened, rage bubbling beneath the surface. Hyunsung demands the gang to release her, but their arrogance knows no bounds. They refuse, acting as if they have the upper hand. Dokja and Hyunsung exchange glances, understanding what needs to be done. When Dokja gives a small nod, something shifts in the air. At that precise moment, Hyunsung's attribute finally reaches the point of evolution, just like Heewon's did in Gumo. Dokja sizes up the gang member standing in front of him, ready for a fight. He quickly realizes that his current stats might not be enough. Without hesitation, he pulls up his system menu and dumps over 2,000 coins into strengthening his stamina and power. The moment he finishes, a sudden deafening crash echoes through the station, sending shockwaves through the gang. Their heads snap in the direction of the noise, momentarily distracted. This is exactly what Dokja needs. Without missing a beat, he bolts forward, moving so fast that his figure becomes a blur. Before the gang members can react, he slashes through one of them with a clean, brutal strike. A scream fills the air as the man stares at his arm, blood pouring from the wound. Dokja doesn't even spare him a glance. He already tells Hyunsung to move. Meanwhile, inside his so-called fortress, Pildu sits comfortably reading a newspaper, completely unaware of what's happening outside. His piece shatters when one of his men rushes in, panicking. The fool barely manages to get the words out. Hyunsung and Dokja are charging straight toward them, weapons drawn. Pildu's newspaper crumples in his grip. Back on the battlefield, Hyunsung slams his shield forward, striking one of the gang members with such force that a sickening thud echoes through the space. His movements grow sharper, stronger as his evolving attribute begins to take full effect. Every attacker that dares to approach is sent flying backward as he pushes through like an unstoppable force. Dokja continues sprinting ahead, barely registering the bodies hitting the ground behind him. He crosses a critical boundary, and in an instant, the station's automated weapons come to life. Heavy gun barrels rotate toward him, locking on, preparing to fire. Instead of slowing down, he keeps moving forward, not even flinching as the first shot is about to go off. Hyunsung, now standing amidst the wreckage of his defeated opponents, calls out to Dokja. Without warning, he throws his shield with precise aim, sending it flying across the battlefield. Dokja doesn't miss a beat. He catches it mid-air, gripping it tightly. The moment he raises it, gunfire erupts, bullets slamming into the shield's surface. A series of loud crashes ring out as every shot ricochets off the shield, sparks flying in all directions. Dokja holds his ground, unmoving, his eyes locked onto the automated weapon system. The battle is far from over. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button as today's like goal is 1,500 likes. Comment next part down below to see what happens next. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.